Hello. Oh my gosh. I have not been able to say those words in such a horribly long time. Truly. I think this is one of the most devastating breaks that we've had, at least in a year or maybe 2 years. Man, there was a lot of crazy, unfortunate timings.
Yeah, it's been quite the time at this end. You might notice I'm still a little bitty croaky. I got bedridden with COVID, and not too long before that, I was all the way up in Aberdeen because my mum was hospitalised. Indeed, I was speaking to her just last night. She just got home. She was in hospital for 2 months, which is quite a long time.
But hey, a big hooray that mother-in-law is back home safe.
I'm delighted that she was home last night because I haven't been able to go up and see her for about the last month. So it's been mostly text communication with her, and I've been feeling so guilty lying in bed going with sweat streaming off my forehead. I hope you're well. Or truth be told, it was Lindsay doing the text because I wasn't doing anything. So Lindsay was texting away his live going, cough, cough, hack, hack. Yeah, I totally failed to Nurgle this last month.
Yeah, he got us both pretty bad. I was I took some time to get all ready for my big trip, and I went on my big trip, and I had an amazing time. And then I came home and was like, oh, I feel a little off. I'm sure I'll be fine. I think I did literally a night stream the day after I got back, and then it got real bad. It got super bad.
I'd also like to pull up a comment because somebody said something that still makes me happy, even though it was almost a month ago now. In fact, it was over a month ago now. Now, where is it? Also, congrats to Andy's daughter. Yeah, Josie, my eldest, has graduated with a first in, let's just simply call it games production because it saves going into all the details. And I was there just before I caught COVID. Probably caught it from her. She's fine. She didn't have it, so it wasn't from her. Just before I caught COVID, and I was down in Dundee there for her graduation ceremony, and it was awesome. Good to see her getting up there, getting boshed on the head to say that she's graduated.
Yes, and we will adjust those audio levels. Thank you for saying that. So I'm gonna
yeah, thanks for that, because just on the touch, thanks, Lord Vorn.
I think Andy would sound louder, but his voice is definitely a little. So I'll boost him.
Croaky today, so yeah, apologies if I am a touch quiet.
Yeah, I'm gonna boost him up a bit.
It's normally the opposite of what.
Yeah. But I also have a brand new mic setup because I didn't realize there was a very annoying electrical problem with my old one. But I finally figured it out, and it's fixed. By fixed, I mean I spent like $400 fixing it, but it's fixed now, so that's nice.
Hey.
But yeah, welcome everyone. We missed you all dearly. We missed each other. Like me and Andy haven't been able to even talk for a month.
I haven't even been able to talk, let alone talk. I just COVID.
Yeah, but we're super happy to be back. There's so much stuff that's about to be kicking off in so many different places that me and Andy are really, really excited to cover. There's we're finally getting old world updates after waiting for the 10th or 11th edition for 40K to roll out. Yeah,
no, it's not.
Yeah, so it took them a while to roll it out, but we're finally getting new books. Obviously, I just picked up the Battle March book, and we have another new one coming out this upcoming Saturday. So we'll be covering those soon. Not this upcoming Tuesday, but the one after that. We're going to be getting the gods invading from other dimensions, which is basically just normal Warhammer. We're just getting into IP stuff. So look forward to that. But yeah, today we're going to be doing something a little different. This is functionally, as far as Sunday streams go, going to be the last stream of what we're going to be considering season 5 for Fantasy Lorebeards, where we're trying to vaguely organize them into seasons. And I was actually just looking at it, and we originally covered Nagash on Lorebeards 3 years ago. 3 years and 3 days.
Crazy length of time. Yeah, that was all the way back in season. I don't know what that season was. Probably
I
one.
want to say season 1. Yeah, because
Maybe season one. Yeah,
that was
long time ago.
it was back. I think it was like the third or fourth ever stream we did together.
Yeah, and it was, oh, well, that's definitely season one. And it was all the way back when we had no format at all. We sort of have a format these days where we had no format and we just sort of opened our mouth and let our bellies rumble to see what would come out. And every week it was variable. Now we've got somewhat of a format and we'll kind of stick to it today. I'm looking forward to this one quite a lot because we certainly took an angle last time. It was a bit sprawling. This time we're going to be a little bit tighter.
Yeah, I actually did go back and listen through the whole thing, and it was really funny to me looking back on it, how much we didn't really bother like having a plan. We just kind of sat there and like, yep, episode 3.
Episode 3. Wow.
Goodness.
Thanks,
so it's going to be nice to be getting back into this one. And I won't tell you what it is until we get to the end of the stream to keep you on the edge of your seat. But there is going to be there's going to be a second part to this, essentially. Yep. There's going to be a follow-up stream to this one next Sunday, where that is going to be episode 1 of season 6. And it's going to be a stream that if you went back and you watched the original Nagash stream, Andy basically said, we should do this stream. And I said, that's a great idea. And it's been 3 years.
But we get around to it eventually.
But we're very, very happy to be back. We missed you all very much. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get caught up on some super chats and stuff, which we really, really appreciate all the support. It has been a big shout out, of course, to the Roleplay show and the 40K show, Ross, Vera, and Alexis for really holding down the fort the last month. Because I checked and it's been a little over a month that we've been both either been gone and or out of commission. So huge thanks to them for really keeping things going around here in our absence. And we're happy to be back.
So happy.
The Fire Snake, the Great Necromancer, once more defeats chaos. He raised us to be here in what ramshackle forms he could manage.
I'm definitely not a servant of Nagash.
Yeah, which is worse? Who could say? Leon Derlin, maybe that one. Great, you're back. I will start my first The Enemy Within campaign soon, and wanted to ask: do you use the Between Adventure rules, or if they're not recommended, please God use them. In my opinion.
Yeah, they're fine. They're a really nice way of quickly covering big gaps that you might have during your campaign. So if you've got a couple of weeks where they're doing nothing and they're holding in town because their boat is being, for example, repaired, it gives you a lovely way to quickly go, what happens during that time? Roll some dice, this happens, rather than go through the night by night trying to figure out how to roleplay through what might be ultimately a relatively dull and dreary set of weeks. But this gives you a quick set of adventures, or at least stories that you can tell that happen. So yeah, they're great. They're fun. However, The Enemy Within as a campaign tends to cover almost every day. So you don't need to use them all that often during The Enemy Within. There was originally a plan for the second set of it, Death on the Reich, where we were going to include an example of how you can use the Between Adventure set while you're traveling. So using it effectively as a traveling set of rules as well as a Between the Adventure set. I left the job before that happened, so that didn't happen, but the general idea still sticks, which is you can roll some random dice rolls, get some fun, cool results that happen for any dead time that you have during your campaign, and then just carry on with the core adventure afterwards.
Yep, and as I always say, go watch Lawhammer for some really, really good examples of how to use them in a very organic way. I think the biggest disservice that it does in that particular book is that it kind of tricks your brain into thinking you should use them between like the parts of The Enemy Within. That's not really what they're for. It's more of allowing you to have the immersive experience of time passing in a realistic fashion, and like when bad things happen or like the weather's bad and stuff, you're able to take time to do things without it really dragging out your play sessions and allowing you to just focus on the important stuff.
Yeah.
And just get to like the meat of what you want to do with when you're together with your friends, instead of just sitting around being like, Oh,
I'm actually, because I'm currently in the process of writing a set of rules. I'm going to write a set for this that's actually better than what I wrote for that bit. Because I know exactly what I intended and what would get edited into. So I'm going to write another set of rules. Thanks for reminding me of that one, Leon. I'm just going to call you Leon, because we are almost certainly pronouncing it wrong. So, Leon, thanks very much for reminding me of that. I'm going to go and add that to my list of things to write right now. Thank you.
yep. Good night, Evil. Been in and out of the hospital this week, listening to you guys a lot, which helped at times, but Christ, some of the fever dreams that resulted from that.
Pardon me.
Well, sorry you've been in and out of the hospital. I hope you feel better soon with whatever you got going on. I hope you are on the at-home and resting phase of whatever it is you're going through. But I also, my condolences for whatever those dreams have transitioned to. To be fair, I have had some weird, like Lorebeards related dreams in the last few days, just because I've been like doing work, and when I sleep, just strangest stuff happens.
Yeah, when I was particularly ill, so we're talking maybe 2 weeks ago, when I was at the peak of it, and I was really hacking it up, and I was in that my sleep was constantly disturbed, so I was waking up halfway through dreams, and I never remember my dreams, like ever. But I was remembering it all the way through being ill, and some of my dreams, as it turns out, are totally fucking mental. They're just mental. So really glad I don't necessarily remember them, but also kind of disappointed because one of them was, in fact, a Warhammer dream, and I kind of wish I could have, always dreamed that every night. I actually feel I feel somewhat jealous of Lindsay, who remembers not only every dream, her dreams are like reality to her. So she has more than one life. She has a dream life and she has a real life. And she remembers all of her dreams every single time. And I kind of wish I had that. She's very rare. She's had entire studies that she's gone into because of how different she is when she's dreaming.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, I wish.
I at least figured out lucid dreaming. That could be fun sometimes when you figure it out.
Lucid dreaming is awesome, and I could do that when I was a kid. Can not remember my dreams now, so can't.
Pumpkin Historian. All hail the return of Andy, first of his name, GM of Lawhammer, husband to Lindsay Law, the great cartographer, lore writer of Warhammers, hater of Gelt, and many more. Oh, and also his co-host, Ryan.
Harsh! Pumpkin!
I mean, it's accurate. It's accurate.
You missed off all my epithets. How could you diss Ryan in such a fashion?
I know. He only did half of Andy's. How rude. Thank you, Pumpkin. We're very, very pleased to be back. Byfoot, time to pop the Fago. The Lorebeards have returned to the clutches of the fishermen, crab dwarfs, and clam rats. Oh, clam rats. Huzzah, good to see you lot again. It's good to be back. We missed y'all. We really did.
It is.
Nuger, praise be the ancestor gods, for they have resurrected our Longbeards. Yeah, just like Rommerdal, we finally got pissed off enough that we came back. I'm pretty sure it is how that works. Jonathan King, welcome back, you magnificent Lorebeards. Good to hear about Mother-in-law. We missed you both greatly.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciated.
Angel Too Bright, Lorebeards. OG is back. Woo! That's us in certain cities after certain hours. Lorebeards.
Less said about that one, the better.
Super Orlock. I'm so happy to see you guys back. We're happy to be back. Spitfire, Nagash was weak. Witness true. Oh, hey, Nagash, I didn't see you there. Looking very powerful and handsome today.
Handsome.
Yeah. Honestly, that's a very accurate portrayal of his and Manfred's relationship in Age of Sigmar, which makes it particularly fun. It is a lot of shit talking behind his back. Joe Numbers, good morning from work, honored Longbeards. Welcome back to the land of the streaming. Hope you all are feeling better today. I genuinely feel great. Andy's getting there. He's getting there.
I'm like 50%, but I'm done with lying around in my house just feeling awful. I need to start trying to do things. And yeah, I'm very keen to at least start. Let's see how well today goes.
Ricky Chapman, awake, O dead, for there could be no rest for ye beneath the earth. I think that's a specific reference to something that I don't know off the top of my head, but it sounds cool.
It's on theme.
There you go. Chris, we'll have to watch the VOD, but happy days that y'all are back. Hope everything is okay on the family side. That Nurgle is distracted for a few weeks. Hopefully Kemmler next season. Kemmler would be super fun.
Kemmler's a good one because he's a character with much more depth than many people realize.
Yeah. And this stream in particular is going to be kind of an interesting revisit for me. One of the characters I will tell you now we will be covering in season 6 is Constant Drakenfels, who the last time me and Andy talked about Nagash, I didn't know him. But now I have listened through the entire series, and it is very funny listening back to the old Lorebeards when Andy said something along the lines of like, Nagash is basically just Drakenfell's redone. And you listen to Drakenfell's, you go, oh yeah, he basically is. he's just kind of a more like over the top Nagash, which is funny to say with how over the top Nagash already is. But Drakenfell's is he's a lot. Nuger, question. I've started playing Old World with dwarfs recently with a mixed clan army. In what situation would throngs from multiple clans gather together for war? Honestly, probably more often than not. Like that would be the norm, generally.
Yeah, absolutely. This would be the norm. So I think you're 100% fine. There is nothing for you to worry about.
Yeah, if anything, it would be much more strange for only a singular clan to go into a war. Like
absolutely, it would suggest a strong family-based political issue that would have a single clan going out. But the standard throngs coming from the holds are multiple clans coming together, potentially multiple warrior clans, noble clans, all the rest coming out as a throng and heading out to do whatever it is that their king demands.
Czar94, we're back. Shall we dive into the trilogy and all of its, let's call it, contents? So, not today. However, that is something I will talk about a little bit later in the stream. We'll discuss that a little later. I do have a planned little speech about that. Zipping Totek. Off topic, sorry. Just rewatched the Chaos Gods tier list stream, and why wasn't Myrmidus on the list? Could be cool to explore a Norska specific stream. I think you kind of answered your own question there of if there's a lot of potential Chaos Gods that we could have thrown on that list. I think me and Andy try to be really careful when we do those streams about like only having a certain number of options because we end up talking so much. And if we get more than like, I think 13 is honest to God the cutoff. We're like not going to make it in less than 3 hours. So, I agree with your follow-up thing that a Norskin specific cultural type stream would be a super duper fun thing, perhaps in season 6. But that is why Myrmidus was not on the list, is that Myrmidus was a very big small fry compared to even some of the already small fries that were on that list.
Yeah.
Petrus, hi, great to have you both back. What language did Gotrek and Felix speak while in Albion? The locals knew almost nothing about the Empire of Not Just Man. Ha, ha, that's a, yeah.
So, back in the early days of Warhammer, Old Worlder was a language, and basically everybody across the Old World spoke the same language with their own dialects. And Reichspiel was the dialect of the Empire. So if you happened to come from Albion, you didn't speak a different language, you just spoke the Albionese or Albioner, depending upon your preference, and it is used in different ways in different versions of the background. You just spoke that version of the dialect, which meant that as far as the novels were concerned, everyone could speak to everybody else. It was super easy, super simple. As time went by and various other writers looked at that and went, that's nonsense, that doesn't make any sense at all. Other writers came in and changed it from dialects of Old Worlder to just a single set of languages, all of which had a common root. So Reichspiel no longer was the same language as Albioner or Albion, meaning that they shouldn't be able to talk to each other. So the answer here is really whatever you decide to make up to make it make sense. But if we were talking about what they would have spoken, well, hey, it's well known that they speak Reichspiel together, so one presumes that it was just a Reichspiel speaking set of Albioners.
Yeah, the somehow culturally aware
Albioners on the island that has no real outside contact with the world.
None whatsoever.
Totally fine.
Niastra, Nagash in AOS is more competent than in the Old World. Well, I would say that you have to keep in mind that Old World Nagash is many different editions and many different styles of storytelling all sort of squished together. And there sometimes some of the older Nagash stories have him as very much a mustache twirling, haha hee hee skeleton man, Skeletor villain, where he was relatively easy to defeat. His plans were really simple. And then as they developed him, they made him more and more complex as Warhammer got deeper and deeper. What I would say is that I think if you take Nagash, as we on Lorebeards like to do here, from the appropriate view of melding all of his stories together to try and make something that meshes. It's still different because in AOS you are dealing with someone that is a god at the start, whereas in the old world he's just a man. He's just a human being for a significant part of his story.
Yeah, I would counter this one, Nastra, by saying that Nagash in the original Old World Warhammer version is the story of a man who becomes a god. I would not say that wasn't competent. I would say that was successful. Now, did he face some extraordinary competition in doing this? Yes. And did he always succeed? No. But the fact that he didn't always succeed, I think, makes the story stronger. When we then move to Age of Sigmar, he then becomes, he's a god, so it's a completely different set of tales. And he has a significantly larger array of tools at his disposal to overcome whatever particular obstacles are placed before him. So I wouldn't say he's necessarily more competent. I would say he's differently competent.
Yeah, and I could also make an argument that in some ways he's less competent.
Yeah, so could I.
He does make a lot of the exact same mistakes. Like the Black Pyramid gets blown up from the inside by Skaven again.
It's like, really, dudes? That's the story you're going to go with? You should have figured that one out, Nagash.
Yeah, so, well, you know, there's an argument there, but I think you could argue it multiple ways. Joe Numbers, the mighty Mortark Law and his companion, the Ghoul King Rayan.
I'm happy being the Mortark. I'm not so happy with you being the Ghoul King.
Honestly, I'm fine with
emotion.
I'm really, it's I like Ghoul Kings. I think they're cool. I don't know.
Yeah, they are cool.
They are pretty cool.
That model. Oh.
Yeah, I know. They look fantastic. Leon, what if Nagash really died at Marak? The consequences of his reign in Lamia would still happen, but still so much would change afterwards. I think we might. So there's a very, very good chance, depending on like how everyone enjoys this stream and reception and everything, which is something I'm going to talk about here in just a minute, where we will take this opportunity to start season 6 off very heavily with Nagash featuring, very similar to what we did with Marathi during season 5. If y'all really want to see that, and if you're like, holy shit, that sounds amazing, I'll go ahead and say right now, the best thing you could do is if you go hit those like buttons down there and you leave comments on the video saying, or the stream saying, please God, give me the full Marathi treatment, we can definitely consider doing that.
So
you'll
what
notice
he's saying is like and subscribe if you want the full Marathi treatment.
Hey, if we hadn't been gone for a super long time, my normal modus operandi would have been give us money. This is it's free. It's free. You just have to ask. Esther, screw you, COVID. COVID sucks. It sucks.
Man. It really does suck, Nastra, and might I say that I am delighted to be on the other side of what has been, from my side, a terrible bout of it. It's been a wee while since I last caught COVID, but this one was tough. Really tough.
The crazy one, the lore that first got me balls deep into Warhammer Fantasy was Ryan's lore video on Cetra from 8 years ago.
Wow. Nice. Take that stab to your heart.
Warhammer Total War has consumed me ever since. Back to Nahakara we go today. Yeah, I could feel I feel like a Tomb King. Thanks to that comment. Thank you so much for the nice words. Chevy Totek, create Dark Elves character stream. Yeah, absolutely. At some point soon. Would like to see twin characters as I am a twin. Oh, that's very cool. High and Wood Elf would be cool for, or High and Wood Halves would be cool for Dark related to Malekith. Related to Malekith, I mean, you could definitely do that. It's not as crazy as some of the books.
It's not crazy at all, given that Malekith had a significant period of time when he was an Ulthuan, and I do mean a significant period of time when he was kicking around doing crap before he became the Malekith that we all know and love today, or Malarian, if you prefer. And we have no doubt that he almost certainly was a sexual living elf. He would almost certainly have potentially had children during that period, and it would be very easy for a writer to step in at a later date, do that, and not contradict any of the lore. We know that he gets married and he gets, down with folks, and stories that were added after his creation already. So yeah, we're cool with that.
Grim Isaac, gonna miss the stream by a week. Be missing the stream by a week. You're fine. That's the great thing about the VODs, man. They stick around. Bulgarian, welcome back, lads. The best of you and yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sean Schultz, how did Nagash steal Nurgle's favorite pawns? His favorite pawns? Is this a reference
us.
to? Oh,
That's us. How did
I'm sitting here thinking of like Variants and Grimm
and bring
and
it back
like,
to the screen?
fuck, Jesus.
Oh fuck!
I know that sent us both into a coughing fit. Oh Lord, y'all can't make us laugh. We're not there yet.
We're not equipped for it.
Tasmasan, glad to see you both back. Yes, thank you. Magladrop, conspiracy theory. Some of the Ever-Chosen's invasions were premature on the Chaos God's part because they tried to stop returns of Nagash / Rise of Sigmar, so that in the long run, it had negative effects. So there is a story that exists around some of the Ever-Chosen, especially if you go back and you look at the Storm of Chaos. The Storm of Chaos tried to pitch the idea that whenever there is an Ever-Chosen, there are forced, like, the way quote-unquote fate works is that there will be champions of the other, I guess you could call them denominations, that rise up simultaneously. And we've seen this reinforced in the newer lore with like the White Tigers of Cathay rise up when an Ever-Chosen is happening. And in the end, in the Storm of Chaos, it was pitched as like the Warrior of Light, which they kind of ditched that for later stuff. But if this is not
Champion of Light.
Yeah, the Champion of Light. This is not an impossible theory by any stretch, especially because there's a bunch of unknown Ever-Chosens. But it's definitely kind of a very nebulous, like, could be.
So I think the quickest answer I can say to support or perhaps contradict that would be that Tzeentch is... Hey!
Hi, Lindsay.
Tzeentch is the god of fate. It's one of his many appellations. He is the great architect. He is the one who orchestrates everything. And you could make a simple argument, which is all of the Ever-Chosens are there for one reason only, to make Archaon. That's it. And to ensure that Archaon's final success at destroying the world. And it works. Chaos wins. Everything that leads up to it is a Chaos victory. And Tzeentch is almost certainly at the core and heart of that. So I'd say yes to your suggestion there. It's not so much of a conspiracy theory as probably the reason. It's the way that Tzeentch works. He plans for... It plans would be more accurate. It plans for everything. And that includes the rise of things like Nagash and Sigmar and how to get around them. And the earlier Ever-Chosens that lead to the peak of Archaon, in some respects, could be argued to be an attempt to stymie, stop, and ensure that they don't take the power that Archaon will later need.
Yeah. Magladroth, again, also built Lord Varian per your specs in the Discord server and Fantasy General chat. Just needs to be painted. I actually went and dug it up real fast so we could just take a little peek at it here on
How's
screen.
that look?
I think you're making something pretty spectacular there.
Oh, I'm excited. I love that sort of shit.
So it looks like you combined the, if I had to guess, it looks like the Necron's Nightbringer with a bunch of corpse stuff. So he's kind of like it looks really good. I'm actually really excited to see where we're going to go with this.
Looking good, Maglador. Nice one.
Yeah. Be sure to send us update pics. We'd love to see where that goes because that looks very, very nice.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, and then just a couple more, and then we will be getting into it. Bloke person, is Nagash powerful enough to bestow fate? Oh, that's a great question. Is Nagash powerful enough to bestow fate points in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay? From what I understand, he's damn near a god anyway, even if he's not an etheric entity yet.
So the answer to this is by the time we reach the end times, yes. And fate points are effectively, if we're to strip away the mechanics and just look at what's happening, fate points are ways for the characters with fate points to avoid death or to succeed where others fail. That's a nice, simple way of doing it. Nagash has been described in the lore in multiple places as having significant ability to effectively be clairvoyant, to see beyond normal sight. He can see what's happening in the world, especially when it's something close to something that he personally is involved with, undead. So I would argue if you want to do this, then they'd need to have the undead trait. that would mean that he'd have direct access to them, and then he could influence things around them to ensure that his favoured pawns survive, meaning that undead characters could have fate points from Nagash without necessarily even being aware that that's where they came from. So could this happen? Absolutely. And indeed, it is something that I would probably do.
Yep, and the best thing is, because you're doing it through Nagash rather than totally not Tzeentch for the normal ones, the way, if they use them, the way they would manifest would probably have some really horrible consequences for other people. Joe Numbers, soft reminder, the part 2 of Luster and Drawers. We know it is on my agenda list.
Agenda.
Take your time on it, though. Nurgle apparently doesn't appreciate the art and timing of bribery. No, he has no respect for it whatsoever. In fact,
Nurgle sucks. Let's just say that. He absolutely sucks. It's been one hell of a month. 2 months,
yeah,
in fact,
if
for
he
me.
could, if he could stop using us as the Pox Fulcrum, that would be grand. Grand. Cole Patterson, Nagash was weak. Watched the build in our Ulrich stream for the first time while you were gone. Super fun. Idea for a stream: build an Emperor class dragon character. That would be really
Emperor
fun.
Dragon, that'd be really fun. Yeah, Cole Patterson. My only extra point on top of that would be I really enjoy our build streams. They almost always come out with something that I never expect. I go in with loose expectations of the topic at hand, and every single time we go in a different direction. And sometimes we're unsure where it's going to go, but then about halfway, 3/4 of the way through, all starts to lock together, and you're suddenly left with a, holy shit, this is amazing. The R. Ulrich stream is one of those examples. And if you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend it. It ends up in a great place.
Singemeister, good to see you two again. Sorry, this is what I was laughing at a second ago. Who wins the Elric off? Malice Darkblade, Geralt of Rivia, Brendan Bloodraven Rivers, or Prince Arthas Menethil? That's
so hard.
That's a drag out fight in the dirt.
Malice Darkblade is really like Elric, but Geralt of Rivia, I mean, he's almost a copy paste in some parts. White Wolf, and Elric was White Wolf.
Yeah.
For me, Malice is probably one of the closest, but probably. I mean, even if as I look at it, I start going, well, maybe not. But yeah, I'd probably pull Malice out of those. Geralt's got enough original character design in there that it feels unique, where Malice is super close to Elric in so many ways.
I would say I only know 3 of these. I don't know who Brendan Rivers is, but of the other 3, I would say it's Malice. Tech27, thank you for the bits. Could we see a story where Tzeentch gets back at Games Workshop for the treatment? Whenever you see their stock market whenever their stock starts to plummet, that's what that is.
Are we ready to go?
We are.
All right. So intro. I'm going to keep it pretty short because, as you may note, my voice is a little bit croaky, and the idea of speaking for longer than a few minutes ago is shaky. But I'm going to give it a wee go at least.
Let's ease into it.
Nagash. Where did he come from and where did he go? Our little friend Nagash. So, in the beginning of Warhammer, Nagash didn't exist. But right from Warhammer 1st edition, we had the undead. The undead as obviously a core trope of fantasy, whether it's vampires, skeletons, zombies. And in the beginning, Warhammer treated the undead like anything else. It was the results of necromancy. Necromancy created various undead creatures, and things like vampires existed without any great depth as to where they came from and exactly how they were created. As we have discussed on more than one occasion, when it came to Warhammer, we almost have 2 different eras. We have 1st to 3rd edition, when it was turning itself into Warhammer would become, and then we have 4th edition up to 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And during that period, we have ourselves the Warhammer world as we know and love, established with extra stories being added with each edition. So in 1st to 3rd, there was no Nagash. He was introduced in the 4th edition of the battle game, the first big battle box set. Pardon me, I am going to possibly cough through this, apologies if I do. The first big battle box set which had itself the Undead Army List attached to it. Now, the Undead Army List changed everything. I do recommend checking it out if you can find a copy, because back in the 4th edition of Warhammer, there was no vampire counts, there was no undead of Nehekara versus the undead of the old world or undead of anything else. It was just undead as one big whole. And back then, Nagash was added as a special character. And in the 4th edition, he was the only place where you would be able to play it all the way up to the end times with Nagash. The 4th edition of Nagash was, as character stats go, fine. He was a pretty good character. He had a model that was, if you want something to do, Ryan, pull up the original model. Show that in the side. His original model was, hell, I've painted that model like 6 times. And it's fair to say that at the time it was referred to as Big Clown Nagash because of how it looked. But back at this point, we get Nagash and who he is. This great, all-powerful necromancer who created necromancy, who came from the desert kingdoms of Nehekara. Oh, here he comes. Look at that guy. I love that guy.
Oh, modeling technology at the time.
Shows the difference between the modeling of 4th edition all the way up to 8th edition, doesn't it? Because that's the 8th edition version of him from the end times. Modeling. Anyway, let's move on swiftly. 4th edition added Nagash, and he was this great creator of necromancy. And the first key fact that we're going to very clearly introduce is that he didn't make necromancy. Let's make sure we're clear about this. He receives it from the Dark Elves. 3 Dark Elf sorcerers teach him all the core basics of necromancy. And he, where he came from with great studies of the dead, used that and developed it into the modern version of necromancy that came later. And he recorded all of, were there any Nagash? No, there was not.
No, that's the funny thing. We jumped straight from one to the other.
Yeah, well, we had a 4th edition. I'll explain why in just a second. So back in 4th edition, we have ourselves Nagash creating necromancy and writing it down into the great books of Nagash. So this is where all necromancy is recorded. And all of the later users of necromancy, whether they're liches, whether they're vampires, whether they are just necromancers, whatever it might be, are using the same magics that Nagash studied. In this version of Nagash, Nagash is originally an old tomb king of Nehekara. They weren't called tomb kings in the 4th edition, but they would become tomb kings. The tomb king of Nehekara, who came to rise up against them and was taken down eventually by his own people. And he runs off. He does various things. He becomes Nagash the Mighty by consuming warpstone, doing great necromantic rituals, and has revenge upon his own desert kingdoms in what is close to modern-day Araby, and attempts a great ritual to turn them all into undead and be his forever servants. It sort of succeeds, but it also sort of fails. This is where the Skaven come in. We'll be discussing this as we discuss his story as a whole, because the Skaven basically save the old world. Thanks, Skaven! And they do it in not one of those classic hilarious, oh, they're useless ways. The Skaven totally save the day. They lose a lot of their number in doing so, but they stop Nagash using a great weapon called the Fell Blade, which they give to another one of the great kings, King Alcadazar of... Alcadazar does not sound very Nehekaran, it sounds more Arabian, but shh! King Alcadazar of Nehekara, one of the great rivals of Nagash. So, we have ourselves this great necromancer who is failed, but because of the nature of his magics, he can never die. He resurrects again and comes back and starts looking for all the bits of him that were cut off. A part of that story involves him going to Sigmar, because Sigmar has his crown. We'll be discussing this crown to some detail later, I imagine. Sigmar has his crown, and he and Sigmar have a big, huge barney, and Nagash dies again. Then Nagash comes back again for what is effectively the war game of Warhammer 4th edition, so you can play with him. We'll go into the details of that story later. All we need to know is that in the 4th edition, he's somebody who is killed, but doesn't actually die. He reforms and comes back together. Now, there's something that's worth noting here. Often, in fan-related materials, they refer to him as the Great Lich. In no point in the lore anywhere is he described as this. What he's described as is the Great Necromancer, particularly as we go to 4th edition. And as we go to the End Times material, again, he's the Great Necromancer. Why? Because he strictly never truly dies. He's an entirely mortal creature. He reforms out of his broken bits after he's been killed. He's not undead. He is something different. He is Nagash. And this is what we get in the 4th edition. He was given a lovely piece of art by Mark Gibbons, another thing that you could look at if you wish to do so, Ryan. The Mark Gibbons piece of art is glorious, which is why when the miniature came out approximately a year later, we were all a little bit surprised. Now, I can tell you what happened there. Mark was given the brief and all of the text. I know this because I speak to Mark every week, because Mark is my partner, business partner over in the Rookery. And I think it was Gary Morley, maybe off the top of my head, don't quote me on that one, who did the miniature design. He was given the brief as well, and they worked separately to create the outcome. Mark did the art, and on the other side we got the miniature. It's up to you to decide which one of those two you think looks better. I am heavily in the camp that the art was much cooler than the miniature that we got later. Look at that thing. Holy shit.
It's insane to look at that mini and go, oh yeah, that's the same thing.
Yeah, that's the same thing. So that glorious piece of art was then given the miniature which came out later, and it's not a great miniature. Then Nagash fell silent. He was a character that was referenced in 5th edition when the vampire counts are added, in 6th edition when the Nehekarans down in the south are split from the vampire counts clearly, 7th edition, which continues to say Nagash is in the background and Nagash created necromancy, to 8th edition, where again, no Nagash. He is a character who's constantly in the background, and by 8th edition, he's given a whole extra story with novels. Super cool. He's constantly referred to in the White Dwarf. He's constantly mentioned in things like Warhammer Monthly, which was the comic, or alternatively the Inferno magazine, throughout the course of the late 90s and into the noughties, and then eventually the 10s, until eventually we reach the end times. And this is when things change for Nagash. Because Nagash is brought back for the end times, and they change his story. Up to this point, Nagash is active down in Cripple Peak, which is where Nagash hangs. And he's active and he's doing things. He sits on his throne and he's a little bit, let's say, statuesque in how he does stuff. He meets various characters at various points, all of whom are well documented. And then they say in the end times, actually, no, Nagash is dead and he needs to be brought back. And a great ritual must be done to bring Nagash back into the material realm from where he was, contradicting all of his previous story where Nagash just reforms back down his Black Pyramid. That's what he does. No, we want a news story. So they made a news story and they said, no, actually we need a big ritual to pull him back together and do the cool Nagash stuff so that we can use Nagash in the end times. This caused a lot of contradictions in the text, some of which we'll cover through the course of today. And we ended up with a new version of Nagash, the model you all know and love today. That was not made for Age of Sigmar, it was made for the end times. And that end times model got released and it was fucking glorious. Not the way of putting it. That is a beautiful miniature. And Nagash was given a whole set of stats. He was shown to be pretty awesome, as you would pretty much expect. And his path towards godhood was very much laid down in the text and solidified so that eventually he became the Nagash, the god that we know and selectively love for Age of Sigmar. So, loosely speaking, because I am keeping it all relatively short today, we have a character that was introduced in 4th edition, was not used again other than in fictional beats through to the end times, when he was resurrected in the end times and represented as a toweringly awesome miniature. The progress of his story is still, though, that of a man who was extraordinarily ambitious, attempting to recreate everything that Nehek, who formed Nehekara, had done before him, and somewhat of a tyrant. And Cetra before that tried to take control, got beaten out, became the Necromancer King, and then pursued a goal of becoming a god. Through the process of that, he creates ghouls, he creates vampires. They are his creation on both fronts. You could argue that the Lamians, you could argue that Neferata is the creating point of vampires, but you can equally argue that it was Nagash and their misuse of his formulas that create vampires. Long story short, he is the origin point of modern day necromancy in the Warhammer world, but he is not the origin of necromancy. Necromancy is much older and is tied through to the Wind of Death, Shyish, and have been used by the elves for millennia before Nagash came along. The story we'll be discussing today is how a man eventually becomes a god.
Mm-hmm.
There we go, that'll do.
I think that'll do wonderfully. And thank you very much, Sion, just on time. Glad to see you both back, and mostly, well, mostly might be doing a little heavy lifting for one of us in particular here, recovered from your illnesses. I'm very much looking forward to seeing you both, and Andy in particular, resuming your adventures in Final Fantasy XIV.
I'm so looking forward to getting back to just being able to sit and play games for a while. Yeah. I'm actually using today as somewhat of a gauge for how well I'm going to be for next week. If I begin to flake through the course of this stream, I'll probably leave off for another few days. But if I'm good, I'm just going to start diving in.
Well, there you go.
Be careful not to exhaust myself.
Yeah, that is the important bit. Not to you don't want to do the classic. Oh, I feel fine, and like go all ham,
and then you're out for another week and a half.
Yeah. So this stream is going to be a little bit different as we move on from Andy's wonderful intro, because as many of you likely in the chat have noticed, we have technically covered a lot of this before 3 years ago, and it wasn't a bad stream by any means. I went and watched through it, and it was very funny doing that for various reasons, because you just so many things come back to your brain of, oh yeah, I was going to do that, and oh man, I can't believe I thought that at the time, and yada yada yada. Mm-hmm. And so today I'm mostly going to be taking us through in a very linear progression through Nagash's story and focusing on particular bits that I felt we either missed or didn't really get to the crux of during our original hack at Nagash's story. So we're not going to be doing as much of like, we're going to cover every nitty gritty thing, because there are some things on that stream that I thought we did a fantastic job of covering and doesn't really need to be revisited, because you can kind of treat it as a part one to this. But looking over at the story of Nagash, something that we talked about a lot in the original stream, and Andy also mentioned in his intro, but is always worth reiterating, is that Nagash is, at the end of the day, the product of a series of events that is kind of like a small rock being thrown off a snowy mountain and building up as it goes down and down and down and down. Once again, we're not going to wax lyrical on it, but the story of Nagash doesn't start with Nagash. It doesn't start with even Cetra. It starts, as Andy said, with Nehek. And from Nehek, it barrels down into Cetra. And then from Cetra, it barrels down into Nagash. We ultimately have a figure who comes from and is a direct descendant of these legacies carried in his own blood, of men who sought to become so much more than what mortality would allow them to do. Nehek, if you really boil down his story, is a man that went into the land of the gods, and he bound it under a singular will and murdered tons of people to proclaim himself a king of all kings, a man who is above all other men. And then he was claimed by death. And later on, Cetra would see his legacy and recreate it, but take it one step further, where Cetra was not okay with being merely the greatest among men. He wanted to be the greatest among men and gods. He wanted the gods to see him as the pinnacle. But even then, he was still humbled by death at the end of his story. And something we covered a lot. Yeah, and something we covered a lot in the original stream, but is worth reiterating, is then Cetra's own hubris and his own fear of death led into the creation of the mortuary cult, which at the end of the day, the mortuary cult, even though it is the core of what we see as the Tomb King's culture, was very much, in a way, a perversion of the original Nehekaran culture, where instead of having a more balanced approach to the gods and life, the Nehekarans became very, very obsessed with their legacy, with immortality, and with the ability to deny death, because they are humans, and that is one of the most human stories there is, of something a lot of people in our own world relate to, and our own history have done, of people that are so terrified of oblivion and not knowing what comes next or being forgotten that they will do anything to extend, if not their own life, at the very least their own legacy. And with magic being able to actually extend your life, Nagash is where this tumbling series of boulders finally hits the proverbial city at the bottom of the hill.
Yep.
Nagash, in a lot of ways, and this is something that if you ever said to someone like him would make him very upset, he was inevitable, but not because of his own personal nature, but because he is the product of so much that came before him. And if it wasn't going to be him, it was going to be one of his descendants.
Preferably him.
Yeah, but preferably him. Yeah, and not to undersell what he's going to accomplish, but it isn't a surprise when you look at everything that builds up to Nagash. It honestly, a lot of what he does is not that shocking, and is kind of, in a way, his destiny was laid out for him in a way that many humans would probably find profoundly uncomfortable if they were told that, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Nagash is the holder of the legacy of those who came before him, and he takes it to its ultimate position. And as we discussed previously, it's very possible that this whole setup was in fact also orchestrated by Marathi. Because it's the Dark Elf sorcerers who provide him with the information that he requires to see through what came before. She's a seer, and she's looking for, as we discussed in our Marathi stream, a way to prevent the end times, and she will take any route possible towards doing that. She has nothing that resembles compassion or what would normally be described as morality. So we have even someone who might be looking at this growing picture and seeing the nature of the type of folk that are being built down there and going, well, if I add this, we might get ourselves something that can hold off against that. And whilst this is not a core part of the story, it's worth keeping at the back of your mind just as you're thinking through how Nagash came about. Eventually, he takes on all of the gods in an attempt to achieve the immortality that had been failed by the previous generations. As Ryan very eloquently put it, the mortuary cult is not the cult of the gods that the gods would probably have wanted. It was a creation of mortality to seek the immortality that the gods had. In some respects, it's not just a perversion, it is almost anti-God, in that it's all about human concerns and preserving their leaders for eternity, to turn them into golden gods that live forever in perfect form. Nagash, as much as we might decry such talk, succeeds where all of the previous Tomb Kings fail. They weren't Tomb Kings then, they were just the Nehekaran pharaohs, for want of a better description. The kings that came before, they intended to achieve immortality and failed. Nagash succeeds. Now, the form Nagash has is not the pretty golden gods that many of the previous versions had, but by the point Nagash has succeeded, he doesn't care. He has no care at all what his form looks like. Indeed, many mortal concerns are quite beneath him. He has succeeded where all previous generations failed. Just one extra little detail here before I pass back. The Nehekarans, as a group, particularly their kings, were looking to achieve immortality in their perfect forms. That's what the mortuary cult is set up to resolve. The great question of what happens next after death? I don't want to die. I just want to continue in perfect form forever. And that is what makes Nagash who he is. It is the previous largely Cetra-styled version of what one should do with the gods, which is take everything they have and use it for yourself.
Yeah, it's in many ways, I think one of Nagash, I've always personally found, this might sound a little fucked up, but allow me to elaborate. I've always found Nagash to be a very, very good expression of the story of what humans are like. Of that, a lot of people, if they're not careful, peoples are ruled by fear and can make a lot of really horrible, disgusting, repulsive decisions to try and alleviate or escape their fears. And that is, in many ways, the story of Nagash's early life. Like we talked about in the original stream, Nagash did not grow up as royalty because he was the firstborn. He was handed over to the mortuary cult to be trained in their ways. And one of the earliest tasks he had as part of the mortuary cult was tending to the dying and the dead, because they have to be prepared. And it's not just the kings, it's everybody. So many people, the things he would have witnessed as a child are genuinely horrific. If you think about the Nehekaran culture at the time he is born, which is kind of it was not in a good place. You have to keep in mind that you would have a tomb prince or a tomb princess, obviously just a prince or princess of Kimri. If one of them, like, let's say, just died on the battlefield or died from an illness, they would be entombed, but so would their steeds, their house servants, their slaves, many of whom this was done willingly, but not all. There were people that was done against their will.
I would argue most probably not. It was done willingly is classic piece of propaganda from those who were in control. So, yeah, the vast majority are probably sent screaming into these great tombs where they are left to die, possibly killed before they go in.
And so you have Nagash as literally, we're talking a child here, not only being raised in a very harsh, strict culture of the mortuary cult, which also gave him very little exposure to women. It's a completely male-centric form that kept their priests isolated, because secretism and the secrets of their arts was of the highest order to them. And he's witnessing people being mummified. He's witnessing people being butchered. The flesh-eating scarabs was a classic way to get people prepared. When you read about the rituals of how the gods were appeased at times by the mortuary cults, those could be awfully destructive. Of, like, you look into the rituals of, like, if a soldier got too bloodthirsty, they were offered, and like they fell out of line, they could be offered, by the mortuary cult would handle this, they could be exiled and basically like thrown out to go die in the Badlands or whatever, or they could ritually commit suicide to maintain their honor and have a place in the afterlife. Because if you get exiled, you're going to wander the afterworld and never know peace for the rest of eternity.
Yeah, this is a really important part of his story, because it's super easy just to look at Nagash and the character he became and think of him as a mustache-twirling villain without really any justification for how he became what he became. But over the course of multiple editions and novels, and some of those are less good than others,
we'll talk about those in a little while,
attempts to add depth to the character, what we have is somebody who has been through what many would see as pure trauma and horror, in that he has been one of the figures that is responsible for dealing with the next step. And he, through the process of that, learns to completely disregard mortality as something that he should be bothered by. He is killing people as part of his religious duties, consigning them to eternal death inside great tombs. And this is a nigh on daily occurrence as part of their rituals. Life and death do not have the same meaning in Nehekara during his tenure of life as it does in other parts of the world. In many respects, he is taught that it is his responsibility to determine who lives and who dies. And indeed, most of his job is turning people into those who die and should be marked for eternity. His entire youth is built around forming Nehekara and making it eternal, not in life, but in death. And that is what the mortuary cult is attempting to do. And at the top of that cult is a host of figures who are all attempting to prolong their life forever. Now, he is in his youth making his way through this, and he has hoary old tomb priests who are sitting there, who have maybe been going for centuries, but they are wizened and they are not.
They're ugly.
They're wizened, ugly, lost themselves, and the core director of Cetra was to make them perfect. And they have failed. And he is coming through this in the full brashness of youth and from the royal line with the right to rule, going, they failed, I can see it. I know what they should be doing and they're not. They're continuing with their rituals, which are ultimately correct in essence. Perpetuality, living forever in undeath, moving beyond life and death. It's not live and dead, it's undeath. They are setting it all up, but they're not finishing it. The job is to finish it. All they're doing is locking them up in tombs to be forgotten for a later era when it will be solved. And they have yet to solve it. And Nagash is looking at this, and he is someone who is not stupid, is not incapable, comes from the position of he should be ruling, he should be controlling, and is seeing success and failure coming hand in hand with the mortuary cult that he's a part of. And the core of his, let's say, drive is that life and death do not matter. It is eternity. And those who are currently in control are not winning that battle.
Yep. So we have a young man who is very much the product of his culture, who also very deep down of something we talked a little bit last stream, but is worth reiterating, is that Nagash himself is someone that is very heavily motivated by fears that he does not acknowledge. Nagash is very afraid of the idea of dying. He is very afraid of the weakness of mortality, and wanting to avoid
I'd like
it.
to add one little detail to that. I'd say he's afraid of living as well as dying.
Yes.
Because both of them, on one side you have the frailty of life, on the other side you have the nothingness of death, and he wants neither.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wish, I will say that I would like to, as a Tuesday stream in the future, and if you want this, let us know down in the comments. There are people that are like, we're ever going to talk about the novels? Not really, because it's, and the reason is, I don't want to say it's not because I don't like them. I don't. I've been very clear about that. I don't like those books. But it's because when you're talking about the story of Nagash, two of the books barely have anything to do with him, even though they're called the Nagash books. He's not really in them at all. And the one that does cover him, it does such a bizarre job that it would essentially derail the conversations we're trying to have about everything else that's ever been written about him.
Superhuman Nehekarans.
Yeah, which is why it'd be great to cover it in like a Tuesday stream where we could really just rip it apart and have a good laugh about it. But I'm not going to focus on it for here. So kind of fast forwarding through various aspects of his mortal life. The other things you have to keep in mind with Nagash when he's young is that Nagash is someone who, although we're all able to kind of point and laugh at the big skeleton monster man, who in many ways gets written as a Saturday morning cartoon villain who has his plans undone by some silliness, when he was young and treated a bit more seriously as a character, Nagash is someone who actually witnesses a significant amount of hypocrisy of that as he's rising up through the mortuary cult. The original concept behind the mortuary cults was that all of their power came from the gods, and they were priests, and they worshiped the gods, and they worked with the gods, and they unleashed blessings and miracles and all this stuff. But by the time of Nagash, due to the way the mortuary cult has evolved, they have become full-on wizards, more like, because much of their power has come from capturing and interrogating jinns, demons, spirits of the desert, and they have learned beyond what the gods originally talked to them about, and they still use those priestly magics, but Nagash is one of the ones who really sees what they're doing for what it is. He realizes they don't need the gods. They really don't.
Yeah, I don't think he necessarily even realizes it per se. He's
not at first
brought up with it.
Yeah.
Because the mortuary cult itself has already reached the point by Nagash's time where it has toured the world. It's not just done the local stuff. It has gone all the way over to the Dragons of the East. It has seen stuff. And we've got little snippets of lore all over the place discussing how they were tasked to answer mortality. And they went places to try and do that.
Yeah, the great question.
The great question. And they were tasked to answer it and make mortality into immortality. That was their job. And through the course of their many centuries attempting to do this, they had effectively come to the conclusion that magic was in the world. They had to capture it, they were using it, and that the gods were in another realm entirely. And they were not, by the time Nagash comes around, doing the divine shit that we see other versions of humanity doing, where they're not really using magic. They are doing something quite different with the gods. The mortuary cult is almost a set of wizards by the time Nagash comes along, and continues to be so later. You could even argue that the seeds of the gods are not useful to us are probably within the mortuary cult. It would not surprise me if at the top of that cult, there's a bunch of figures who are controlling it who go, the gods are our slaves, the jinn are our slaves, the demons are our slaves. We are the ones in control and in power. We are using magic. We are the ones who are doing stuff. And Nagash would look at that with both interest and also horror, because he's brought up as a religious individual. And if he is introduced into the mysteries of the mortuary cult, he's going to find out that the answer is magic and etheric beings, demons, gods, all the rest of it, regardless of their power. They are beyond, and their power is not anything to be other than used.
Yeah,
because that's what they're doing at the time. They're using the power of the gods. They are not being blessed.
Yeah, and where I really wanted to go with this, as we're considering what makes Nagash who he is one of the deeply unexplored, which is hugely tragic, aspects of his story, is that we're going to have a man who is very, very gifted and is a surprisingly adept sorcerer, warrior, scholar, philosopher. Like, he's very well educated, he's very naturally gifted, but in his 20s and 30s, keep in mind that as part of this cult, some of his duties involve capturing and interrogating etheric entities and learning things from them. And if you've watched any and all of me and Andy's Lorebeards streams, you'll know that dealing with etheric entities is a task and a half, because you're dealing with creatures from other realms that are going to be trying to screw with you in ways to try and get themselves free. They're going to know things about you don't know about yourself. Like, you have to have an ironclad will to deal with them, but there's still a cost to these bargains. There's still, like, he's essentially, in many ways, the mortuary cult. You wouldn't think of them this way from like an empire point of view, but in many ways, there's a lot of demonologists among their ranks. And
yeah, I mean, I think, just to directly state it for what it is, if you wish to use a more standard old world example for what Nagash is at the moment, he's a demonologist. He's a demonologist, and not really an early necromancer as we understand it. He's a user of what will become, when he meets the Dark Elves, dark magic. But he already was dealing with etheric entities, and that is just another way of saying he's a demonologist. And that is what he's working on. And again, if you're thinking, oh, it doesn't sound quite right, the core of demonology, the manipulation of etheric entities and banishing them, still exists in the Empire. Some 2,500 years plus the, 2,000 on top, so that's 4,500 years, something like that, years later. And it works through the Light College, which is still tip to toe covered with all of the trappings of Nekara. Okay, they're carrying their snake staves. They live in great pyramids. They are using those pyramids to channel the magic down to them, the light magic, because light magic is used to dismiss and banish demons and control them.
They got the great mirrors on top of all the pyramids that refract the light to really concentrated power.
And this is stuff that comes from, in many of its various roots, from its ancient traditions that go all the way back to Nekara. And light magic is the ultimate destruction of demons, but also control as well. And it is, after all, the intellect. It is where all intelligence, thought, and might is held. And that is what Nagash is studying. He is already, almost certainly, before he even meets the Dark Elves, a pretty talented interrogator of demons, using a mixture of whatever winds of magic they can gather down there. The winds are somewhat weaker as you move away from the poles, and is then concentrated with their pyramids. He's using that to effectively find out about the great secrets that lie beyond. That's his job as a mortuary priest, to find those great secrets. And that makes him a demonologist.
Yep. And the last thing we're going to talk about before we get caught up on Super Chats and move on to some other topics is the other thing, and once again, in my opinion, criticism of the novels, where I feel like the first book should have really like ended with Nagash becoming like the the king, as opposed to it ends with like the complete end of his Nehekaran arc, which is just way too much for a single book. One of the things that's never covered with Nagash, but should be probably the most important part of his story is, and so we'll talk about it a little bit, is that at some point along this early, like in his early 30s, either when he meets the Dark Elves or a little bit before he meets the Dark Elves, despite being completely raised around and within a culture where religion is literally the most important aspect to them, he completely and utterly loses his faith.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting to see how that works, because the most obvious answer is he becomes, because of his strong characters, capabilities, whatever it might be, he moves through the ranks swiftly. We know this is the truth. And he probably learns the truth of what the mortuary cult knows. And the mortuary cult knows that, broadly, the gods are just great, massive, etheric entities and possibly are not worthy of worship. They are something that is not, as far as the mortuary consult is concerned, the great divine answer that they were looking for. If they were, they would already have the answer to immortality in the mortal plane. They don't. They don't have it. Everything that they have managed to secure by this point has been done so through mortal means. They have gone off, they have gathered information, they have brought it back, and through a mixture of alchemy, nascent necromancy, and a whole host of other disciplines all wrapped together, mixed up with demonology et al., they have created potions and elixirs that massively extend their life through magic. It is not the gods that give the mortuary cult its power. They use the gods to gain their power. So it seems relatively likely that Nagash's great crisis of faith comes from the very cult that he was given to as the firstborn child. When he finds out that the gods are what they are, and he moves from going, I need to respect the gods and use the gods to try and find the great answer the mortuary cult is seeking, to simply stating, it's up to me. I'm the one who's going to find the answer, because it's up to mortal people to understand how to get what the spirits and the gods already have, which is immortality in the timeless realm that is the Aether.
Yeah, one of the great unexplored stories of Nagash's lifetime really should have been like a secret war or schism within the mortuary cult of those like Kotep, who Kotep is not nearly as powerful as likely many of the other priests, because Kotep would have been alive during Nagash's age. Like when Nagash is rising up the ranks, he should have been surrounded by a bunch of old dudes that are like hundreds of years old and are just these shriveled little guys, but they don't exist in the novels because they forgot.
Missed entirely,
Yeah, and it's like he should have been surrounded by these old men bickering, where some of them see themselves as, no, we are the servants of the gods. And some of them are, no, we control the gods. The gods aren't what we thought they were. They're just these tools for us to use. And that should have been like a whole secret war that led to Nagash's rise in a lot of ways.
And in some respects, I think that is probably the best way to imagine the story that's not been told. And that is that Nagash got involved with the great schism in the mortuary cult. And those who believed that the gods were tools, and those that believed that the gods laid out the great divine path that they should be following.
Yeah, there's a character that doesn't exist that should exist. Nagash had a teacher who should have been an incredibly influential man in his life, who really got him on they are tools to be bent to our will.
If we want to look at the end that we achieve, and I know I always say this, particularly when it comes to Nagash, but I'm going to say it again. If we want to look at the broader Warhammer setting and say, who believes the gods are tools?
Oh, yeah.
We know the answer. We know the answer already.
She's lurking. She's
lurking in the background of Nagash's entire life. And possibly the greater schism that lies at the heart of Nehekara's mortuary cult. Because the gods are Morathi's tools. In fact, she, in many respects, created the gods to be worshipped as entities rather than dealt with on an individual basis.
I want to say something we talked about in the Morathi streams, and you can see we're tying all this together. Lorebeards verse, man. That's generally what we're talking about. Is one of the things we discussed is that Morathi is the great spy network of the world that's there thousands of years before Neferata is even born.
Yeah.
And as one of the great spy networks, one of the great manipulating systems, she would have been claws in what was going on in Nehekara. she is influencing, like, the whole thing of what happens with the mortuary cult. If you were telling a cohesive worldwide story, the idea that you have mortuary cult people, you have these priest wizards who are churning across the world looking for answers, and you're going to tell me they didn't go to Nagaroth? They didn't meet Marathi's agents?
Slain,
yeah, they didn't get captured.
All sorts of horror. And imagine finding yourself a life priest as Marathi. How fascinating they would be. A human that's possibly a couple of 100 years old and has managed to extend its life. It would be a fascinating thing, particularly given that we know what Marathi is attempting to do. She is looking to defeat the Chaos Gods, to stop the destruction of the world.
These are a cat's paw.
Yeah, and she has ourselves a potential route to do so. Plus, the important part to always remember, Marathi, she's also a seer, so she's looking at all the different threads of potential that lie before her. And we know the outcome. Nagash is going to be central to the war against chaos, and is going to be central to being not necessarily a moustache-twirling villain, as far as, at least Marathi's concerned, but being anti everything she stands for. She can see that as a potential outcome. So she's going to look at it and go, I would like to see if I can bring this to pass. Now, it might not work. It might work. But we know how Nagash gets all of his powers. And that's what happens next for the man, because Dark Elves arrive in town.
Yep. But for then, let's get our super chats caught up here.
Indeed.
Scion, I'd be interested in seeing you both do some episodes eventually comparing and contrasting equivalent characters in 40k and fantasy, like Nagash and Cesaric, Archaon, Abaddon, Teclis, and Eldrad. That'd be a really fun collaboration with the 40k guys. Yeah,
particularly as well because my knowledge of where the characters have developed into is pretty weak on 40k side nowadays. I know 40k lore back to front up to about 2010, and then the next 15 years, I kind of gave it a drop. So I have no idea where Eldrad has gone since my version of what Eldrad was. But yeah, fun.
Russ W, so glad to have you both back. Thank you so much. We really appreciate
Thank you, Russ.
it. Pumpkin Historian, are there aspects of Tomb King lore inspired by real-life historical ancient Egypt? I honestly think that concepts such as Ma'at and Isfet would fit well into the Tomb King's lore and culture. So there should be, and if you ever sat down with like a writer that was about to write and said, hey, look at all these Egyptian references, they'd go, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to fit those in. Something me and Andy talked about quite recently. I say recently. Recently, if you teleport us to a month ago, I remember we were having a discussion on stream about how silly it is that Warhammer designed Nehakara and then called it the River Vitae and the River Necris, which is
Latin.
Not Egyptian. So, like, should it? Yes. Does it? Probably not very much.
Yeah. Indeed. This is a classic example of Warhammer lore being written by a host of people who are not very aware of the real world stuff beyond a dabbling here or there. And they conflate different ancient societies together because they don't necessarily know any better. And things like River Vitae becomes a thing. And you're like, that's Latin. We need a reason for that to be the River of Life. That's what Vitae means in Latin. We need to have a reason for that being the case. But they never bother with it because they don't really care about the linguistic details of the world that they're building. So, yeah, Christ, Scion, thanks. But yeah,
thank you. Yeah, well,
we'll get to that in a moment.
Ligarian, I would be curious to see Nagash's reaction to Neferata improving upon his elixir of immortality. I think such a scene would be great. This should have been a scene in what, in my opinion, probably should have been the third book of the Nagash trilogy, and it doesn't exist because those books are terrible.
As we have noted in the past, Neferata, when she takes the great elixir of life and creates it, builds a better version than it seems Nagash had created. And various stories that are very Nagash-centric go, oh, Nagash perverted it and twisted it into something else. But if you actually look at what she has, she didn't.
He meant Neferata.
Look at the fact. Neferata, pardon me. Neferata, yeah. I'm ill. I'm going to make mistakes. She didn't. Neferata nailed it. And then curses are added later on, often by Nagash, who fucking hates what they've become, and then eventually takes control of them.
Yeah,
this would have been amazing.
Yeah, the answer that exists based on the context, unintended context clues that we have from the setting, is that Nagash in some ways is impressed, but he also gets very deeply envious.
Yeah,
because he basically ruins her elixir. Like, he deliberately goes out of his way on two separate occasions to curse what she created and to make it worse because he is insulted by it, essentially.
Ruins and, to a degree, takes control off because all vampires at a later date are largely
He's threatened.
underneath the influence
He's
of
threatened
Nagash.
by her
He's
elixir.
threatened by it. Neferata could very easily have become a bigger, better version of Nagash. But Nagash just keeps on pushing and trying to win and trying to win. He has got, arguably out of the two, the stronger long-term motivation, which is, from his perspective, to become a god and become better than all the rest, where Neferata's ambitions were somewhat more... they were less grand, shall we say.
Yeah, more personally focused.
Yeah, more personally focused, yeah.
Yeah. Stephen Lucas, how would you describe what sets Nagash apart from other uber lich god overlords like D&D's Vecna or Pathfinder's Tar Baphon the Whispering Tyrant?
So, first, I need to know more about them before I can speak to it with any form of authority. I don't know them very well, beyond names. And that's pretty much what they are to me. So answering this question for me is nigh on impossible. All I can say is, I do know what Nagash is.
Yeah, the only thing I could once again, I also am not super familiar with those characters. The closest thing that I can think of off the top of my head is that Nagash is often a bit... Nagash, at the end of the day, is a very self-obsessed character when it comes to the concept of making everything one within him, basically being the absolute control freak of all control freaks, which I don't know if those characters are quite like him, to the point that Nagash wants to basically be all that there is. Like, he is it. He's the only
wants to be the overlord of everything.
Yeah, which those guys could very easily be like that as well. But in Warhammer, it's a bit of a unique dynamic, to the point that he is an enemy of gods because they are other wills, and he does not tolerate that.
In some respects, I think that might be the best angle to take, in that he is antagonistic to the gods, and it's not so much he wants to become one of them. He wants to control them as much as he controls everything else.
Yeah, that is my favorite Critical Role fact, is that Vecna was Kit Bash Nagash.
Which, by the way, met Matt just a few weeks ago when he was here here in Edinburgh. We went to watch the show, and afterwards we were invited back to the after show party. And Lindsay and I and my eldest and her fiance sat and chatted away to them all. It was nice to see Matt again. Haven't seen him for a while.
Cool.
It was
That's
cool.
so cool. Frencher, Nagash is not a god. He's a naughty boy. He is. He truly is.
I don't think Nagash would see himself as a god. I think he would just simply see himself as someone who's striving towards his ultimate goal, which is complete control. God is unnecessary.
Nagash is he's the kind that would hit you with like a technical definition to be like, I am not that because I am physical.
Yeah, exactly. Nagash is not, strictly speaking, a god as they would understand it, and I don't think that he would like the term.
No. Shadishian, Corrupt Pantheon, surprised Dark Gods didn't pop up. They
very different.
Yeah, and it's
the Pantheon's not corrupt. The Pantheon is fine. The people that are
for the mortuary cult. Yeah, the mortuary cult's the problem.
The Pantheon's fine. The mortuary cult looks at the Pantheon and says it's not enough for what we need to do. And some of them almost certainly are deeply devout, and they're continuing the Pantheon's overall goals. Others, though, simply aren't, because they are following the whim and the desires of Cetra. And that is ultimately to create immortality in the mortal realm. And the gods do not answer that, because it is not a part of their plan, so to speak. This is a mortal plan, not an immortal, divine plan. So we've got ourselves a real schism within the mortuary cult that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a good example that I was doing some recent reading up. A good example when you deal with like the likes of Katep and how he would view something like the Great Awakening, the whole like bringing back Cetra and everyone in perfect golden immortal bodies. One of the things that the mortuary cult, the faithful, believe in is the idea that the world has had phases, or especially around Nehekara, where in ancient times the gods lived on the world and were physical flesh and blood things that lived for thousands and thousands of years, and then they naturally came to an end and they faded, their physical bodies faded, and they took on the forms of animals, and that was the next stage in their like evolution. That was the next phase of the world. And then in the phase after that is when humanity rose up. And Kotep would tell you that there is a phase coming where humanity, just like the gods changed, humanity will change, and they will become these golden immortals and such. But you would have other figures during Nagash's era, you would have other figures that would argue, no, we must make this happen. And the gods aren't willing to do it, or they're too weak to do it. So we have to do it ourselves.
And a lot of that can be just laid down at the feet of pure ambition and impatience.
Yeah, which, like, man, what a human trait.
No, and in some respects, that's because they are mortals and they fear their own death and the fact that they will not see what the next steps come to pass because they'll have died. The classic issue of the billionaires of today who are all looking at the healthcare options and going, holy shit, we're on the cusp of figuring out how to live forever. But I'm going to die before it happens. So I'm going to pour money into life sciences in the hope that I can get that injection that stops my telomeres from killing me. It's somewhat similar. It's a classic story of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Nagwal, been a while since I ripped, such is my power. I saw your other comments that was a misprint, but that's a very funny autocorrect there.
What, ripped? What was you trying to say?
Tipped.
Fuck, you're gonna kill me. Wait a minute.
instead of sounding like the most like proud flatulence statement.
Okay, that was funny. Okay, that was funny.
Thank you very much, Nagwal. Very funny. Superlock, to directly rip off Dan Carlin, the great man of history is wrong, but if it wasn't Nagash, it would have been someone like Nagash.
Yeah, it's true. Humanity, with its almost in terms of numbers, what feels like infinite numbers, is always going to raise those individuals who grasp and grasp and grasp. And those graspers are going to raise in one form or another. If it wasn't Nagash, it would be someone else who's like Nagash.
Yeah. Sign of the Emperor. Interesting how similar Andy's explanation of the Nagash era mortuary cult is in mindset to the Iron Warriors' view of the chaos in 40k. Chaos serves us. We'll capture and bind demons and war machines as our slaves. I mean, it's kind of a tale of corruption that's kind of old as time. And the Chaos Dwarfs have a very much more similar philosophy, specifically with chaos in particular. But the mortuary cult, in their sort of unintended ignorance of chaos, because their chaos is so in many ways weak during this era and so far from them, I don't think they were as they know about chaos. They're not ignorant to chaos because they speak with many different things, and chaos is a well-known enemy of theirs.
Demons.
Yeah, I'll just say yeah.
So, yes, and this is a story that Warhammer-wise is much older than is laid down in 40k, because the Dark Elves have long been associated with exactly this mindset. The idea that chaos is a tool to be used. The Dark Elves of Warhammer have been like this since pretty much Dark Elves were first created. And you can see it reflected in many of the older artworks. If you take a look at the 4th edition army list and the image of the witch elf on the front of that, she has a cornate symbol on her hat. She has a symbol of corn.
They read Michael Moorcock and were like, "Oh yeah,
yeah, quite."
Sorry.
The Dark Elves were using chaos to its own ends. They weren't, in some versions, they were worshippers of chaos, and that turned into worshippers of their own gods and using chaos. They were demonologists in some respects. And Malekith Malarian quite literally uses a greater demon of Slanesh throughout the course of one of his great attacks down into Ulthuan. Good, exactly. And that greater demon is just a tool in the arsenal of the Dark Elves. This is a pretty old story, and the mortuary cult almost certainly will have an aspect that will see the divine as something to be used, because that is what Nagash comes to personify. So yeah,
honestly, like if you were doing like a slice of life look into the mortuary cults era during this era, I wouldn't be surprised if there were lectures given by certain ancient lich priests about how even the dark gods may theoretically be used as tools, just like they've used the Nehakaran gods. And he would probably be that would probably be a very small discussion he has with close friends, because it would probably be considered a very not okay thing to say.
Yeah, you've got to remember that they are dealing with the mortuary cult, a host of divine and etheric entities who will have opinions on chaos. And their opinions are going to be keep away, don't go near, don't touch. But they also have a divine mandate from Cetra, which is there is no limit to your inquiry.
No cost is too great.
No cost is too great. You must find, which means there's going to be corruption of various types within the mortuary cult itself. Those who are divine and pure, those who have possibly fallen to a greater degree or less to chaos, those who have been influenced by outside sources, those who are going to be sent to stop those who've fallen to chaos. So there's going to be the equivalent of inquisitors. There's going to be an entire society's worth of inquiry that is world spanning. Chaos is going to be a part of the mortuary cult. Of that, there's no doubt, because they'll be aware of it the second they speak to the first djinn. Hey, djinn, what's chaos? Because many of the djinns are directly related to and aware of demons of a variety of types. So the answer to all of this is, yeah, it's a part of who they are.
Yep, Skitari boy. How long would it take for Nagash to rule the Imperium with an iron fist if you just dropped him onto some random high world 40k? Honestly, probably. I don't know. The entire Imperium would take a long time.
The Emperor, is he dead?
Yeah, that's the big question.
And if he's not quite dead, does that mean he's undead? What is the Emperor? And I think Nagash could be the answer to that. It would be, he's my little pal.
Yeah, it would be very bad for the 41st millennium for Nagash to roll up. It would be really
assuming
bad.
that Nagash is capable of using his magic, because it is directly related to the winds of magic, which don't exist in the 40k realm. You're drawing magic directly from the warp instead, which is a very different capability.
You'd have to finagle that out.
It's very possible that he would be more powerful in 40k than he would be in Warhammer, because Warhammer, you don't have access to the warp. You are no direct access down through to the aether at all. You are drawing magic from the winds of magic. If he could use psychic powers, he would probably become a god in very short time.
Yeah, which he probably could, because man, 40k loves just being like, that guy's a wizard. And when I'm reading through parts of the Horus Heresy now, and every once in a while you'll meet a character and you're like, well, that's just clearly a fantasy character just here doing stuff. Fire Snake, can any wizard use dark magic even if they normally use one lore of magic? Yes, but you
got to be trained.
If you don't know what you're doing, it's very dangerous.
Yeah, it's a little bit like saying, can anyone drink water if they jump into a river? Well, yeah, but if that's a fast-flowing river, it's just going to swash over you, and that's dark magic in comparison to your average winds of magic. It's an enormous torrent that if you don't know how to control it, it will corrupt you, turn you into something worse, and very possibly lead you to possession. It's not necessarily...
you could just explode.
Yeah, who knows where it's going to go. Dark magic is nasty stuff.
That's our shadow. And he lives! 8888888.
Cackle's dead.
Gaston. This Marathi line, where she has a semi-son in Nagash, is funny given what she tries to Age of Sigmar. She will never beat the allegations. No, she won't. And she should, to be fair.
I think the Age of Sigmar story could be added with extra depth as well if Marathi...
Yeah, go check out our Marathi video on AOS. We do talk about her and Nagash's throwdown.
There is definitely some extra depth that could have been added there to make it a bit more interesting.
Yeah, Magladraw, do you think Marathi miscalculated with Nagash? In that classic trope, she lost control of her vision / creation because what she created / his power level? If not, it could make her infallible. So I think Marathi is a character that you have to keep in mind. So seers are always tricky to work with. And I would say Marathi is a character that by the time Nagash happened, so she's already been alive for thousands of years, she's very good at calculating risk. And I would say that, like, does Marathi think it's maybe would Marathi, if you sat Marathi down for a chat, would you say, Marathi, did you know he was going to turn an entire subcontinent into an undead hellhole that has wiped out entire civilizations? She'd probably be like, no, that was probably an unintended side effect. That is not.
She care.
I don't think she cared. Yeah, I don't think she'd care at all, but she'd probably be like, did I see that coming? Not really. But like, do I give a shit? And did it work towards my overall? Is there a threat to chaos in that part of the world now? Yes. Did it hurt me? No. So
I'd almost go the flip. I'd say that would be her preferred outcome. Because it means that entire group of humans no longer falls to chaos. because they become undead and they're cut off from the etheric realm. In some respects, all of Nehekara, she'd rather it went further, much further. In some respects, Nagash didn't go far enough for, if you're going with that as her intent. Nagash didn't go far enough. He was.
I would very much agree
for her.
Yeah, I think for Morathi's, what she would want in the end, Nagash being cut down by the Skaven was Chaos getting a 1-up on Nagash. Yep. And
Agreed.
that would have been when she would have been like, ah, damn it.
Bollocks. Yeah. That's when it all sort of goes tits up. And just because you're a seer, it doesn't mean you see everything perfectly. If that was the case, then she'd be Tzeentch. And Tzeentch doesn't see everything perfectly. His multi-headed nature means that he sees things in 1,000 different ways. And Morathi, somewhat similarly, just sees possibility. And the possibility that she sees would ultimately be the end of the world comes to humanity. So how can we curb it? And Nagash does a really good job of trying that.
Yeah, I mean,
really good job.
He wipes out
and
a whole.
He almost succeeds.
Yeah. So
I'm going to flip that one, Magladroth, and say yes, she miscalculated because Nagash didn't go far enough.
Yeah,
she didn't lose control of it. She never had control of it. She just set it off and hoped.
Yeah, Scion.
Fuck me.
I'm bribing you for the next create a character for the stream. For this, I'd like to see you make a fantasy equivalent to a 40k character who exactly can be decided later. Maybe Erebus or something like Conrad Kurz, maybe something entirely. It could be a really interesting exercise. I will play. We'll play around with the idea of it. That might be a fun one to have some of the other Lorebeards on, because we'd like to do more crossover stuff as the summer is wrapping up. So that might be something we might get together with them and have a bit of a discussion of maybe doing. It could even be a 2-parter where we do it both ways, where we talk about having a character for fantasy not show up, but like be interpreted into 40k, and do the opposite of taking a 40k character and reinterpreting them into fantasy. That could be kind of a fun exercise for us.
Yeah, I think one of the great joys of the Create a Character streams is the audience participation. It's super important because that's what takes it in new, exciting ways that we have to then try to figure out and justify. And that would, to a degree, be stymied if we had a character that we were attempting to create. Because we would be sort of fixating on trying to bring those characters parts into
we
Warhammer.
wouldn't want to set too much.
We'd need to figure out how to best make that work. But I really like the idea, but I'd be pretty concerned about how we manage the execution.
Yeah, I would not say let's go into this with a character in mind. It would be, we're going to do a character from this setting being translated into this setting, but we're not going to say Hugh. We're going to figure it out live, because that's the magic. That's the magic of those streams.
Yeah, they work so well when we have no idea what's going to happen, and that just makes it more fun for us.
Yeah, but that's a great idea. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. So Panza, how would Dark Elves use necromancy? I can imagine them puppeting a corpse, but maybe communicating with the dead. Also, if it's dwarfs, it should be elves. You'd think that, but for some reason, that's not how it works.
It isn't. So the answer to this one is go look at Shyish in general.
Yeah,
and that is
talking
largely...
to the dead. Like ripping apart someone's soul for information or just for fun. Some Dark Elves are horrible.
It's often forgotten, but the Dark Elves have an enormous amount of wraiths and ghosts and similar that they have put in place, often the dead souls of their enemies or their slaves, that haunt cliffs or haunt ships or haunt wherever. They've been using necromancy for millennia. Necromancy is not a new thing that was created by Nagash. The modern dark magic version of necromancy is Nagash's creation, but necromancy as a whole, it's there's a big umbrella. The Venn diagram of necromancy includes all of Nagash's work. But it's a far bigger circle where there's lots of other types, which include all the magics that are done by the Amethyst College, for example.
Mediator meditating. There we go.
Theory. You got there.
The random spearman who killed Arkhan was actually the changeling, which connects to the treachery at Tlanksa later. That's a super cool theory. The
I love
changeling
shit
being the guy
like
that gets
this.
them.
I always vacillate between one of two extremes with stuff like this. On one hand, I go fucking cool, and on the other hand, I'm like, do we need to make Warhammer smaller? Sometimes just things happen. Sometimes things just happen, and if we make everything happen just because of a special character, you're then left going, oh, the Warhammer world feels small. Having said that, though, I quite like this one.
Yeah,
I can see
that's
it happening.
a really fun theory. Yeah,
I can see that one.
To blam. How different are spiritists focus on spirits, etheric entities linked to the material realm, and demonologists? Both work with etheric kind of entities, but I feel like spiritists are far more accepted. So I'm going to give a theory before Andy answers, because Andy's going to have like what I would consider the correct answer. I'm going to give you a theory.
Bad answer. I would say correct.
Yeah. The theory that I would give you is that in this example, someone that is more like a spiritist is going to so if we're thinking almost like a hag, is almost going to be someone that is more about treating etheric entities as equals in that they speak to, negotiate, and talk to them and encounter them in their natural spaces. Traditionally, demonologists are people that control etheric entities. They summon them, they bind them, they capture them, they torture or rip information out of them. Is usually why demonologists are seen in such a negative light, is that there is often a lot of, which I guess you could say is like non-consensual relationships between the sorcerer in question and the entities they're dealing with. It would be my hypothetical.
There's two super simple ways to answer this, and both are broadly correct. One is you're dealing with demons. You are dealing with the minions of chaos, not spirits. It's a completely different affair. And it involves dark magic, because that's the only way to bind these entirely etheric entities. It's the only ways to drill a hole through to the aether and pull them screaming through. Dark magic's dangerous, corrupts, and turns you into something else. So on one side you've got that, then you've got everyone who's dealing with spirits and other types of entities from the aether. They're not using dark magic, they're often using ancient traditions, and they're not dealing with demons. But even then, some are. But the second you cross into the line of demons, those who are applied to the chaos gods, then you are a demonologist. It's that simple. Are you dealing with demons? You're a demonologist. Are you dealing with spirits? Then you're not. You're doing something else. And you're not working with the corrupted nature of chaos.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is like capital D demon.
Demon. Yeah.
Elementary Soda, miss you guys. We missed y'all too. Thanks so much for coming by. Ricky Chapman. Okay, in just a second here, I'm going to get back to story stuff. Ricky Chapman, we talked to Nagash in a Warfrip campaign. He found us very amusing and told our friend's life wizard, had she been born in his time, he would have recruited her. He then absolutely decimated the party. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Although pulling on the Latin part, decimate 1 in 10. So, hey, only one of your party members died.
Yeah, because that's totally what that word means for most people nowadays.
Yeah, totally. But hey, we pulled out Vitae. I'll pull out any old Latinate
that's funny.
use.
Leon, in the Perfect Nagash series, it talks about the child of the Cathayan Emperor as an ambassador to Lamia. He then returns home with Neferata's quote-unquote gift. How would you rewrite this? I would make him a child of Yuan Bo personally. So, I'm going to do this really fast because we don't really have time to get into what is a genuinely very fascinating subject of, there is definitely, and it's been very heavily reiterated in the old world, a strong connection between particularly Lamia and Cathay, because that's the city they connect to through the Sour Sea. And, we know for sure that they had positive relations. Those relations kind of fall apart during Nagash's era, but after Nagash is defeated, they come back up. And during Neferata's time, there definitely is stuff that happens, and then the Cathayans eventually pull back. But we know Herakte ends up going to Grand Cathay, and the old world has once again said this is still the case.
Yep.
Herakte still journeys to Grand Cathay. So that being said, would there be a child of one of the dragons that goes to Lamia? During earlier times, I would say yes. Post Nagash, I would say
there's
probably
no dragon-blooded sugarkin at that era. They don't come until Sigmar's time.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah,
They
the first one
changed
doesn't
the
happen
lore.
until Sigmar.
So
Yeah.
the old world just
So it would have to
rolled
be
over
one of the. It would have to be
this
one of the
issue.
actual dragons.
it would almost certainly be one of the dragons that arrive. Probably Yin Yin.
Yin Yin would make by far the most sense, and she's
Probably.
a very underutilized character.
Indeed.
And plus, what we're seeing with the vampires of the Cathay, I would not be shocked if a lot of them end up being like vampire piratey types that live in the most populous areas, which are the eastern side of Cathay. So I could see it kind of being a Yin Yin storyline. Which would make a lot of sense.
So if the old world hadn't changed the lore, I agree entirely with you, Leon.
I completely forgot about that.
It's such it's almost a castaway line, but it's massively
impactful. The first Shukagun was definitely like Sigmar banging Miao Ying. It feels
I've already overwritten that in my own words, where there's
definitely the case
of a particular type is what it is inside Lorehammer, for example, because Lorehammer had already predated that with some of its stuff, where there was dragon-blooded kicking around long before the arrival of Sigmar et al. So this one is sadly not going to be the case, but it would make, I think, a great deal of sense.
Bulgarian, what do the Nehakaran gods think of all this? Direction of the people of Nehakar, the cult, and Nagash and Light. So this is something that's not really well explored. So going back to storytelling, when Nagash basically takes over the mortuary cult of Kimri, so he rises up to like the head priest. And his brother is on the throne. His younger brother is now king, the priest king of Kimri. Nagash very much starts to take the mortuary cult in a particular direction. He manipulates it to very much being a more of a sorcerer cabal as opposed to a priestly endeavor. And this builds up to, as he spreads his influence and he becomes more powerful. Kimri itself is like fairly strong at this point, though his brother loses a couple of battles and isn't seen in the best light. Though some of that is implied to be due to Nagash's own treachery of Nagash like giving information to some nearby cities and manipulating like quote unquote barbarian tribes and other groups to make his brother look bad. Because already by this point in his life, Nagash already has eyes on his brother's throat. Like he's already plotting to commit fratricide and take over. This, of course, leads to the very infamous thing, and something me and Andy have talked a lot about, but it's always worth reiterating because it's such an important part of his story, which is his Dark Elf teachers. That there is supposedly like a storm or a big fight that happens where Xandri somehow captures 3 Dark Elf sorcerers. One of which is a man, which we talked about a lot back in the original stream, so we're not going to go super over that because this screams that these 3 were sent here deliberately and not on accident, because there's a lot of curious, you know, you could always argue that, it was fate, but like that's silly when you have such a manipulative Cirrus.
Dark Elf sorcerers, for goodness sake.
They're
the
literal agents of Marathi.
and also exceedingly powerful. They're not the ones who fall to the whims of a storm. They're the ones that create the storm. Unless, of course, it's been inflicted upon them by something more powerful.
Yeah, so they get captured somehow by Xandri, and Xandri drugs them up, sends them to Nagash as a gift.
In fact, I'm gonna interrupt because
all I'm gonna say is
we always bugged me.
Yeah, we went ham on this in the original stream, so you have to keep it short.
So I'm gonna keep it short and simply say this. Dark Elf sorcerers, the powerful ones that we're dealing with here, are the equivalent to WMDs. And we are dealing with, as we go back, so weapons of mass destruction, for those of you who might not necessarily know what I'm talking about, they're enormously powerful. And we're dealing with a human society, which at this point is the equivalent of wandering around with pickaxes. Okay, that is the power differential. They are enormously powerful. Now, we could argue, hey, you know, they got caught up in the great storm and they collapse on the beaches, the great sand beach that goes on for 1,000 miles. They land on the beaches and they crawl up and they're hit over the head or something equally stupid. And they're dragged in and somehow they know how to control them. Perhaps by speaking to a djinn who says, it's a powerful sorcerer. Wrap them in obsidian. Whatever you want to say. Hold them in that pyramid where your dad's just died. Whatever else it might be. But the second they wake up and they're given any form of freedom, boom, they're free. Boom, the pyramid blows up. Boom, they're off. They're enormously powerful. And if they're in a position where they're going to be teaching Nagash, they have to have freedoms to channel, to show, to demonstrate, to do shit. Which, if they can do any of that, Nagash is going to be basically at this point a child beside an adult. So much weaker, so much less capable. It'd take the entire mortuary cult, all those ancient wizened warriors, to control just one of those sorcerers. They would all have to be banding together to do this, not Nagash off by his side doing something. This is an enormous flaw in the story because of what they turn Dark Elf sorcerers and sorceresses into. Now, there's lots of ways we could try to retell this story. The novel doesn't. It just basically says
it's a fixable plot hole if you still want to keep it that way. But I also don't think it's stronger
and they're
that
running
way.
Away.
Yeah,
they're male and running away because the Dark Elves have got a "we hate male sorcerers" line. So
you have there's a big battle between like a High Elf fleet and a Dark Elf fleet, and like they're the survivors.
Yeah, but they can be easily manipulated by Nagash thing is really weird. Just weird. It doesn't make sense, but it does the second you say they were ordered to by Morathi. And the second you add that, suddenly it becomes much more of a thing. And then Nagash takes control of them.
Yeah,
because
I think
he learns fast.
I think that's the important thing, is that when some people hear that, they're going to be like, oh, elves. It's like, no, you have to remember, though, Nagash ends up on top at the end of this little tale involving them, which, if anything, makes him a more impressive character, not less.
I think the obvious part should be the point when the elves go, oh shit, we're fucked.
Yeah.
We've been sacrificed to this and the whims of who have sent us here, when Nagash becomes so much more powerful than them in a way that they don't expect, because they are full of the arrogance of the elves, where the elves think they're the best magic users in the world. And we have discussed previously that they are not. They believe they are, but they are not. And we did this in the Albion stream, for example, where we showed that the Albion wizards were as powerful, if not more so, and were capable of doing things
we
like
also talked about this in the Araby stream, where there was Arabian sorcerers that were capable of literally chasing the High Elves off the coast of Araby.
The Dark Elf arrogance is almost certainly the tool that would be used to lead them to teach this pathetic little thing. And then this pathetic little thing beats them, eventually surpasses them entirely. And that's a great story. And it's a story where Nagash himself, if we have him as a young man, he might not realize that they're suddenly terrified of him because of X, Y, or Z. But I think that the character of Nagash, which is portrayed to be somewhat of a genius, I reckon he probably looked down and went, something's up here.
Yeah,
why are they doing this? There
is a pin drop moment that we don't get in the novels. There's a pin drop moment where Nagash figures out what's going on, and then we get this we should have had this excellent, almost thriller spy story of Nagash trying to extract as much information as he can from them while staying ahead of them, and them trying to use Nagash as a tool and not letting him realize that he's a tool.
Absolutely. I mean, you can even see how Morathi would pitch it to the Dark Elves. You are there to take control.
Yeah, and then the Dark Elves eventually realizing that she just
fucks them. Yeah, and possibly they don't even realize it, because Morathi's a really good manipulator. They think they failed, that somehow this human is a freak who somehow managed to beat them. The impossible has happened. They don't necessarily blame Morathi for this. They blame their own inability. Nagash is a tool of chaos, or whatever else that they try to self-justify as. But ultimately, the human wins, and the elves lose.
Yeah, and so with Nagash, once again, this is something we covered very heavily, though, when we have the first human in history to be very eloquently tutored by elves. You know, it kind of makes me think of, we did the whole what if stream about what if Morathi founded colleges of magic, and that's basically what Nagash is.
Yeah.
Like, he's basically the first graduate of the quote-unquote dark college.
Yeah. And he is taught how to use the winds of magic and how to use dark magic in particular, something which is a gift to the mortal realms by both Hecate and Morathi. they made dark magic together during the Great Wars against Chaos as a tool to bring Chaos down. And they gift that to Nagash. This is not something that can be sort of brushed aside with a quick, oh no, it's just the Dark Elves doing a thing. It doesn't make sense if you do it that way. But the second you add Marathi to the equation and say, Marathi has set this up, it completely not only makes sense, it makes for a brilliant story.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot to be said of that Nagash would have not just learned sorcery from the Dark Elves. A lot of what Nagash does after the Dark Elf arc seems to heavily suggest that he learned a lot from them philosophically, how to run a government, how to control people, how to like properly utilize slavery, essentially, not in like a vain human way, but in a way to truly build like the whole construction of the Black Pyramid, how to build magically resonant structures. Like there are so many things that they would have done to him personally, with not even intending to. But I think a lot of Nagash's cruelty, a lot of the ways when he, like, you have early 30s Nagash when he meets them, and like I think like his like late 30s or early 40s, because he's with them for at least a decade. The man that walks out of that is a man who has been very culturally altered by his experiences and learning and wisdom. There's a lot they rubbed off on him that they likely did not intend to, much to the horrors and disaster of what's about to happen.
Yeah. Nagash is not a product of the Dark Elves, just so we're clear. Nagash is a product of his ancestors, of the people that came before him, but he was tipped over the edge by the Dark Elves. Yeah. He was basically wandering along the precipice of a great slide, and the Dark Elves came along and went poke and sent him down, and he became what he became,
and gave him the tools to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why their arrival feels so perfect, because they are really
too perfect.
Yeah, Nagash would have just been a despot. He would have just been a tyrant if the Dark Elves had not shown up exactly when they did.
Yeah. The Dark Elves changed everything. And if you wish to pass that off as coincidence, and
you can,
they did. And if you wish to tell a story where the Dark Elves are not capable of doing all the things that Dark Elves can do, you can, and they did. If you want to tell a story where the mortuary cult is basically a secondary character, and all the ancient peoples that are there are not really influencing it, you can, because they did. But none of it makes sense, which is one of the reasons why we often look at the Nagash books and go, we really wish they'd been done differently.
This makes me laugh. I'm gonna alter a word, but the idea being he's a product of his environment, the Dark Elves entered, but I would change it to enriched his environment.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. So once we get past the Dark Elf saga, we get to Nagash takes over Kimry. He murders his brother in a very over-the-top, cruel way. But after he kills his brother and seizes Kimry, we talked a lot, so I'm not going to go super over it in the original stream. We talked a lot of
stream. It's available on our channel right now.
Yeah,
go back to season 1.
Yeah, it's been re-uploaded to the Lorebeards channel, so go check that out. But one of the things we talked a lot about that stream about Priest King Nagash, where he very effectively walked a very he does not get enough credit for this, and which is something we talked about a bit. He walks a very delicate situation of having basically committed a genuine cardinal sin. Like, if you go read the story of Prince Apophis, everything that happens to Prince Apophis is because Prince Apophis commits regicide and fratricide and patricide. Like, he murders a royal family, and for that he's given the worst imaginable punishment that the Nehekarans can think of. But when Nagash does it, the other cities are like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. But he is able to wield his own power effectively enough and be enough of a diplomat, despite his arrogance and his cruelty, that he's able to keep the other cities at bay for quite some time, and take tithes from them, take tributes from them. and has enough time to build the Black Pyramid, do all that. Like, he reigns for a while and maintains a very difficult, once again, not trying to give credit. I'm not saying that without the Dark Elves it couldn't have happened, but there's a lot about the way Malarian rules that you can see in the way Nagash rules, of how difficult and careful the position of Nagorond is when dealing with Harganeth and all of these other Dark Elf cities that would absolutely murder the fuck out of him if they could. And the other thing that happens in this era that we did not get to talk about a lot is as we build up towards the first Great War. So the war where the seven priest king cities will unite against him. Nagash does a lot of study. I'm not going to talk about what the novels do because the novels do some stupid stuff here that I think is horrible.
We're going to have to discuss those novels at some point because
we are, and I want to do a bonus stream on that. One of the things that we never actually talked about in the original stream that I want to talk about now is that Nagash was ultimately preparing for war. He's not stupid. He knows it's going to come down to a drag out fight between him and the other cities. And what that really ties down to, back to this earlier comment from Vigarian, is Nagash knows what's actually coming is a war between him and the Nehekaran gods. That's what's coming, and he knows it. And he starts preparing for it.
I think just to answer that question, one other quick way, it's that the gods move in mysterious ways. They're etheric, and they don't really get the material realm. The material realm and the gods are two very different things. And when they were part of it, which they were at some point, if you believe the myths, they had a very different perspective. But what they've lost that. They're no longer what they once were. They live in divine realms, and those divine realms are populated by spirits and entities and souls and all the rest of it that are quite removed from what's happening in the material realm. And people from the material realm go over there. One of the quickest ways of saying is, what does they think about it? They don't. They just don't. They're largely unaware of it.
It's kind of like asking, like, what does Ulrich think of, like, his various cult sects fighting each other?
Yeah, indeed. Or alternatively, what do you think of what the ants are doing outside your house? I mean, you're aware if they start trying to infiltrate your house, then you're like, hey, fucking ants, get the fuck out of my house. I'm going to use, I don't know, a pesticide or boiling water or whatever you decide is the correct way of dealing with the ants. But as long as they're just hanging around out there, not a problem. They're quite removed from the day-to-day basics of what's going on with mortality.
Yeah, and we, of course, have we've talked a lot about Nagash the Tyrant building Black Pyramid. He uses a lot of slavery. He does a lot of horrible stuff. He initiates a lot of wars, not originally against like the other cities, but like against the other peoples. So like the ancestors of modern day Araby, the various groups, greenskins and stuff that he can find out in the Badlands and the Darklands. He takes tons and tons and tons of slaves in, is demanding lots of tributes, mostly of bodies, like people from around, because he needs all of those bodies to build up his Great Pyramid. Obviously, he builds up the 9 original Mortarchs, who we talked a lot about their flawed version of the Elixir of Immortality, because Nagash deliberately gave many of them a shitty version to that. It was almost like a addiction, so they'd have to keep coming back to him for it. But Archon the Black was his most faithful servant that he picks up somehow a little bit before this era, but really comes into this. Archon the Black is a kind of an unfortunate story because the novels, and I will say it again, butcher his character and make him... Yeah, they make him a terrible character, where in the original stories, he's almost played much more as almost like a random orphan that Nagash found on the streets and takes in and rises up because of just how deeply loyal and faithful he is to Nagash no matter what. Which fits Nagash as a character, but also shows him in a very complex light of that Nagash genuinely would allow people to rise up in stations that, according to regular Nehekaran culture, shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
Like they were nobodies, but Nagash at this point in his life values loyalty so deeply. And this plays into
but some people, I'm going to drop in just a quick one. Some people don't often get this. And they're like, I don't quite get why this is an important point, okay? And we can draw some real world comparisons here so that you can try and understand perhaps someone in power who might be a tyrant who values loyalty. And take a look at America just now. Take a look at their president and take a look at the people he surrounds himself with. The most important concern is absolute loyalty to his cause. And if you have that, you are supported to the end. And the second you don't, you're discarded. We can see that through multiple iterations of American politics over the course of the last couple of years, or the first edition of Trump, rather than second edition Trump, and hopefully never a third edition. We don't want a third edition Trump. And that you can see, this is arguably, for a comparison, a tyrant who values loyalty. Why? Because the rest of the people around him do not want necessarily the end goal that he wants, which means loyalty is paramount, and Arkan is loyal. And that makes him the best as far as Nagash is concerned. Now, if you want to see a real world equivalent, go over to America and see somebody who is entirely loyal to Trump, no matter what he does or says, even when it looks entirely un-American or undemocratic or whatever else. That's your Arkan the Black.
And so Nagash in this era surrounds himself with people that he thinks can be the most loyal, people that can be the most people that will further his agenda, which is a very it's a really dangerous agenda as well, because he's creating so much death, of which Nakara has always been a culture that was obsessed with it, but they were more obsessed with controlling their relationship with it, whereas Nagash is just causing it on such a obscene scale. Like the amount of people who are probably the mortar of the Black Pyramid is beyond comprehension. Just because the structure is horrifically massive. Of like, if you've ever like sat down and like gone into Total War and really seen how tiny a single person is compared to just a single block of the Black Pyramid, it is a structure that makes our world look at our pyramids and go, well, those are fucking puny. Like, it's monstrous. And once he builds it and it's drawing in all this power, this eventually builds up to Nagash commits finally enough atrocities that, though, as we said in the original streams, the cruel irony being that it wasn't really the atrocities that he was committing. It was more that his demands of the other cities got so high that they finally were like, all right, you're hurting my personal economy, says King of Xandri. Now I've got to come fight you.
As is often the case.
Yeah, I can tolerate the murder.
Direct issue. Yeah, everyone just sort of lets it happen until it's something that goes against them, and they're like, I'll take it so much until I can't.
Yeah, and during this era, one of the things that the End Times tells us about that I completely forgot to cover, because it's a really important aspect of showing how dangerous Nagash is, but also in many ways how prepared he was that in the many of the early stages of the War of the Seven Priest Kings, is that when the cities unite at the start of the war, it is rough for them, because Nagash he very much plays dirty. He poisons various things. He has no problem unleashing plagues. We've talked about his original Mortarchs. You have like Virion the Grim, who probably doesn't look like what he'd look like later when Nagash would return as the big, horrible undead lich thing, but like was still a guy that probably utilized some form of plague in his warfare. You have like all these like big, nasty things. But the big story that the End Times tells us, that once again I forgot, is that the other mortuary cults call upon the gods to smite Nagash, and the gods try. Patra, who is seen as like the head of the pantheon, he's the sun god. In classic fashion, the sun god is often the big one in a lot of pantheons. And Patra sends down his genuine divine servants to fight Nagash, like, which they are described as what we would understand as angels.
Yeah,
they are huge. Like, we're talking at least Space Marine sized, if not larger. angelic humanoids with great glorious wings of feathers that come down from the sun, wielding the blades, like imagine like Cetra's blade, because Cetra has a blade that's enchanted, that would come down to fight against Nagash. And Nagash, because of all of his knowledge of these etheric entities, these things, he's been studying them his entire life. He beats them. He like, these things are basically like, I don't know about greater demons, but at least like medium to lesser demons.
Yeah, they clearly are. And by this point, he has reached the level of etheric awareness that he can take control of any etheric creature inside the material realm. He's a demonologist. He's a spiritologist, if you prefer. But he can control etheric entities if they make the mistake of entering the material realm. And they did, and he wins.
Yeah, and just like Andy said, because of his demonology knowledge, he doesn't just kill them and they vanish back to the ether. He captures all of them.
Yeah, completely.
And he remakes them in his image. Which, what the fuck?
Which again just shows he's a very powerful demonologist. He's basically doing what Malarian does to Nakari. He's taking control of a greater demon-like creature and using it for his own ends. Again, the connection here to the way that the elves, the dark elves at least, work on these things is very clear. I want to bring up one other comment as well, just to make sure that we've said it. Let me just quickly scroll back when I bring up this one from Dr. Awesome. Modern Empire citizen claims these pyramids were made by space frogs, not people. There's a reason that pyramids lie at the heart of elven divine architecture, whether that is the Shrine of Azurin or the Shrine of Cain. There's a reason that pyramids lie at the heart of the Slan, the lizard men.
Pyramid structures are a big thing in Warhammer.
They're a big thing in Warhammer, and by the point that the Dark Elves arrive in Nehekara, pyramids are already a thing for a variety of reasons, and again, all harking back to the gods. They are
the Chaos Dwarves built what is essentially a big pyramid.
A gigantic ziggurat, exactly, which is a pyramid. Pyramids mean something in Warhammer, and they are all connected together. It's not just space frogs because of space frogs, it's because they interact with the magics and the divine magics of the world.
Yeah, they're genuine divine architecture.
They are.
So anyway, Nagash does this horrible thing where he basically takes etheric entities, he makes physical bodies for them made out of flesh and mostly bone and all this other horrible shit, and he creates the Morgas, where he basically does what we know Nehekara do, where they take etheric things or souls and force them into a physical body. So he kind of basically creates his own version of the Ushapti, which are the Morgas. Though, of course, there's the whole thing for the end times trying to explain why they weren't there, being like, there's not enough magic to animate them, so he just buries them. Which, sure. Why not?
Sure.
But as we all know, despite the fact that Nagash starts the war in a very, very strong position, because he utilizes a lot of things people have never seen before, he's unleashing undead, which in a way that has never been seen before in Nehekara. He's unleashing plagues. He's unleashing his Mortarks, which are superhuman, precursors to vampires. They're not as nearly as strong as vampires, but they're still pretty nasty. And a lot of them are powerful wizards. But he does lose the war. As when the Nehekarans, they do get organized, they are a very strong warrior culture in their own right. But despite the fact that he beats the etheric agents of the gods that come right at him, the mortuary cult's adaptation to Nagash, which we've talked about in the previous stream with the Ushapti and some of the other major constructs, Nagash cannot beat the constructs.
Yeah.
He gets genuinely overwhelmed. And there is the whole thing with Cathay, which I don't think is a complete nothing burger. The idea that Lamia does show up with Cathayan weaponry that they have traded and trained in for many decades, and they do shoot him with genuine black powder weaponry that he's not terribly familiar with. Enough things come together where Nagash is defeated, but not killed, defeated. He dies later. As we talked about in the original stream, he flees into the pyramid. Archon the Black holds everybody off, and then himself dies via the magic spear that we talked about. It's not actually magic, sorry. The random unnamed person who speared him. But he has his very dramatic death and buys time for Nagash to escape. But Nagash does die because he flees out of the Black Pyramid into the northeast, and he
Dies.
Yeah, he dies, and we talked about it a bit in the original stream, but it's worth reiterating that his death is very peculiar in a way, because Nagash is so, and there are many ways why this is the case, but Nagash, it could be argued, because he's so exhausted, he doesn't even realize that he dies.
Assuming he even does.
Because
if he dies, he reforms back in the Black Pyramid.
Yeah, there's an interesting. I like that the book is written this way, the Liber Necris, of that Nagash really isn't actually sure what happens, because he's so feverish and he's so exhausted and he's dehydrated and he's completely out of his mind, that the way he tells the story that Manfred reiterates to us in the Liber Necris is that he does die. His body basically just collapses on the ground, and he doesn't realize, and his spirit just kind of keeps walking. But eventually he realizes that he dies, and he basically loops back around to his body, and he forces himself back in. And there's a very cool aspect of it where Nagash describes when he repossesses his body, he could feel the agony of his dying body trying to move, like the muscle, like tearing and screaming as he forces himself to do this very unnatural thing. But it's also a really weird thing for him to just sort of pull off.
I think it's bullshit.
Yeah.
I genuinely think this entire section is bullshit. Not bullshit as in the writers have fucked up, where we've discussed in previous issues 1,000 times where writers have not done a great job. I think here the writers have done a great job, because all of this is in character. All of this is from Nagash's perspective. All of this is, broadly speaking, going against the very thing that he's already taken, which is the elixir of immortality.
Yep.
He's already got it. He's perfected it. If you describe to me a vampire without any curses wandering through desert wastes, without curses, so the sun doesn't affect him, I would say his biggest issue is the blood. Oh, the blood doesn't affect him. He can just drink from the ambient magic, so it's fine. Basically, he's immortal. He's not going to die. This sounds like myth building. It sounds like proper myth building by Nagash to show that he is special and different, and to also get people away from the fact that he's built a very real elixir. It's an elixir that grants him immortality. So there's not anything about, oh, you need to go and figure out that shit to become like me. It's more, oh, I did it through the superhuman effort of my will. Yeah,
because that is what Nagash specifically says in his. Well, that's what the teller says in the myth, but Nagash is the only one that told the original story.
And the elixir we're aware at this point effectively makes him immortal. And if he dies, because all the spells are in place, if he dies, he reforms in the Black Pyramid. This has already happened. The spells for that have already occurred. The Black Pyramid's done. It's finished. He will, if he dies, reform there. Did he? No. So thus, I call bullshit. He didn't die. This is myth-telling to try and make Nagash special, and to basically tell everyone else that the elixir of unlife that he created is not something they should pursue, because it doesn't work. Look what happens. The only reason I continued on was by will. And we know the books in Nagash are filled with lies, because almost every time the books in Nagash are described, they say, and Nagash filled them with traps and lies so that others wouldn't be able to reach his immense power. He is tricky. He's clever.
Yeah, they're classic. They're classic alchemy cookbook type things.
Yeah. So this feels like it's basically Nagash bullshitting to keep people off his track. Did it happen? Yes. Something occurred in this area. Did he die? I think the answer is we have absolute objective proof he didn't, because he doesn't reform in the Black Pyramid. If he had, he'd have been hiked back to Kemri, and he'd have been fucked. Actually fucked.
Yeah, and it's the first group that he encounters after this little saga, his wandering through the desert for however many years, is the Ghoul cults. Like, he finds a people tainted by Warpstone who come to worship him as a god, and he likes it and encourages it. Like, you can tell this is his myth that he tells to these people about why he is better than them. They are his lessers, and they should worship him.
So we have, I think it's a beautiful piece of myth telling and storytelling, and I think it works perfectly. But I think we can also, looking at it objectively from the outside, look at the text and say, Nagash is clearly lying here. He has to be, because if not, the basic mechanics of who he is no longer work, which is when he dies, he goes back to Khemri. That's
and
what happens.
Don't forget that Nagash is very much a figure who refuses to admit his own human flaws, and Nagash is very much the kind of entity, especially by the time you meet him in like the later eras, that he believes many of his own lies.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, what we have here is a piece of self-justification for why he lost. Why did he lose that war? So that he could make the next step towards his immortality, which was to defeat death
he had
by
to
sheer force of will.
He had to shed his humanity to become better.
Indeed, where the truth of it is, because we can see the truth here quite simply, he got beaten, he got driven out, he wandered around for a while completely fucked, eventually finds himself a community of humans, and then rises himself as a god above them so he can make use of the warp stone that sits around Nagashazar. It's a pretty simple tale. He didn't die because he can't die through normal means, and if his body completely fails and is taken out, he reforms back in Khemri. Neither of those things occurred, so what we have is someone who probably was delirious, broken, really upset, whatever else it might be. The divine commandments
I'm sure he
from
was
above have failed.
It's not having a good time.
I mean, it's very possible he literally broke mentally. Through this entire period, because he has been defeated. Everything that arguably his ancestors have told him should be his has been taken away from him. He has lost big time, and that means he has to turn this somehow into some sort of victory, because that's his mindset. And the victory that he eventually gets out of this is almost mythic. This was the period where I finally understood what it was to be Nagash, for I summoned my spirit back to my own body that was dying, and I continued onwards. You know what? Something like that may have occurred, but I would argue the word death, because if death had come, an entire new set of rules immediately gets placed upon him.
Yep. Cornshima, praise the Chaos Gods that you're back. I missed you guys. Felt like every time I'm in Japan for an extended day, you fantasy guys always go on hiatus. Then stop going to Japan. No,
it's Kuroshima's fault.
Yeah, it's all his fault. We figured it out.
Pardon me, sorry.
No, you're all good. Lord Eisen, on Nagash / Vecna, both share a story of a great ritual going wrong when someone surprise attacks with a special sword and cuts off their hand. Always curious if Nagash losing his hand was a reference. It almost assuredly was.
Yeah, probably. I can't remember who wrote that book. I'd have to go check it. But there's quite a lot of D&D references in early 4th edition rule books, and I can't believe that they're all accidental, particularly from some of the work from Bill Kick. And again, I wouldn't mind asking him if I ever got an opportunity, how influenced he was, because it might have been entirely subconscious, although it might have been very conscious, because there's quite a lot of direct uplift and drop of a bunch of ideas, because back then Games Workshop wasn't big. Games Workshop was this tiny little company in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
that
no,
was
so it was like
cool little stories, and they were
like,
happily just taking on board any cool shit that they liked and building it into something new. So these sort of influences.
It's
were
fantasy
very
battle
common.
world. It's where you just put everything you like.
It's exactly that.
Pumpkin Historian, idea of a Tomb King. A Tomb King who has forgotten who he is and wants to remember who he was, hires an archaeologist and historians to run do excavations to anger some. That would make a very fun roleplay story.
There's something in that, Pumpkin.
Like that could work really well, actually, and would be very funny and also really scary. Sign of the Emperor. Technically in 40k, there's a difference between psychic powers and sorcery. There is an overlap for followers of chaos, but sorcery is more ritual magic and usable by non-psychers. You'll see a lot of it with word bearers. I look forward to when I get to that point.
Yeah, but it's also worth noting that the Warhammer world has something very unique, which is the Winds of Magic. 40k has a completely different setup.
Alpha Mens. Why are so many evil things named Nag? Nagash, Nagarond, Zar Nagarud, from Tolkien. And his naming conventions.
Yeah, kinda. And it's also worth noting that in Warhammer, there is the literal root of all worlds are real. So if one person says Nag is evil, then Nag is evil across the world, because it all has the same root. Because in the Warhammer world, there is a core language which describes everything. And some refer to that as the dark tongue, which is close to it. The language of demons, spirits the same. So there is certain eternal truths of language within the Warhammer world. As, for example, means eternity in both Khalazid and also Eltharine, depending upon which one of the greater runes that you look at, or alternatively the dwarf runes that you look at on the other side. There are certain universal constants.
Magladrop, for my 40k campaigns, decided not to have Nagash show up directly because he's a very overpowered big bad. Having his older Mortarch show up, on the other hand, made for some really interesting stories. Oh, dude, having heralds of Nagash, that's a good way. That's a
I had
very
Nagash kill the fucking Emperor in my game.
Wouldn't be hard for him. Listen, when you're stuck on a chair, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well, the Warhammer world invaded the Imperial Palace in one of my games, because you can do whatever you want in your own games.
Yeah, you can. Joe Numbers, hear me out. Four-part series. You guys make a new character with the audience, then 40k beers make one. Then all four of you fit the fantasy character into 40k, then vice versa in the 4th episode. Not impossible, because that would actually only require,
but not possible.
Yeah, he meant not impossible, but
yeah,
yes,
that's what I meant. Hey, look, I'm ill. My pills will be wearing out.
Yeah. We know. Not actually. I am deeply intending here in the coming, like, especially in September, for us to hopefully be doing a lot more, like, not only like branching over streams, but also like gaming, like more casual gaming streams and stuff. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Nystra, Andy, do you know / remember what happened to what is going to be the 3rd undead army, the Black Cults of Nagash?
It never happened. Cut a long story short, Nastra, there's a ton of army lists that never happened. And the most obvious reason why something doesn't happen when it comes to Games Workshop from this year is because financially it didn't make sense. You've got to create an entire new army with new miniatures, which take up so much space in the shop. And at that point, each army was already quite big with the number of codes, as in the number of blister packs and boxes each one took. There's only so much space inside the shops. So during this era, they had to constantly think about which one's going to be the most likely to sell lots and which one is not going to take up too much space in the shops. There was, for example, during 4th edition, an entire ogre army list that was made all the way back before we got the ogre kingdoms that came later, and it was a very different style of army. But I've got the text of that somewhere on one of my computers. It included ogres and trolls and all sorts.
Yeah, and I've talked about how there's a whole Fishman thing in 8th edition.
There's a ton of stuff that never happened, and the usual reason for it is because someone came along and said that does not make financial sense. Let's not do that.
Gaston, quick about the Dragon-Blooded. Perhaps there were unrecognized bastards for Sigmar, but then the Emperor sees the use of ritual, recognizing them officially. I wish that'd be cool if that was the case and you can run it that way. But the book that told us this pretty heavily in God voice was like, this is the first Shuken gun. It's practically a miracle because of the whole twin-tailed comet business.
Yeah, I agreed on that. No other way of putting it.
Magladrop, does Nagash know / suspect Marathi made him? That would be a fun story to explore. With the whole thing of like his involvement with the Dark Elves and what happens to him later, this would make for a good short story to explore with Nagash. I would not put it past him to be well aware of her later in his story.
Yeah, I think the answer to this is probably no. Or yes. And it's a choice. If it's no, it speaks to the manipulation of Marathi, it speaks to how she works, and it also speaks to the almost egocentric nature of Nagash. Nothing makes Nagash but Nagash. And that works for his character.
Yeah, this would be one of those things where I actually hard agree with Andy. I think deep down he would know, but he would never admit it to himself.
And I think that the short story, if you were doing that one, it could be the small awareness using perhaps Shyish and looking back into the past and perhaps managing to look into events from the past and seeing that perhaps there was more to it than he realized when he was effectively mortal. And him completely pushing it aside and saying that can't be the case.
Yeah, this is one of those things.
Such is his arrogance. And then when it comes to Age of Sigmar, it also speaks to his desperate desire to say, I'm bigger and more powerful than you.
Yeah, this would have actually been the perfect... thinking back to the Marathi stream, this would have been the perfect catalyst of why he genuinely throws down with Marathi.
Yeah.
Of like her forcing him to confront that she was an architect and that he was very much a product of a lot of things coming together. And it wasn't that he was special. It was just that he happened to be born when he was, and him getting fucking furious at that assertion. Because that would genuinely eat at that would be his greatest insecurity.
Yeah, he's got a lot of he's got a lot of character traits that suggest that he doesn't have, for all this might sound like it's sort of contradictory for Nagash, a great deal of self-confidence. Because it's almost all power, power, power. And
he's definitely compensating for something, yeah.
For people who are doing that, often inside, feel quite different to how they're projecting themselves. They're little men inside very big shells. And anything that attacks that shelf will be a threat to his entire personality. So Marathi would be a gigantic walking threat that he would constantly seek to basically push down. So that would be fun if true.
Yeah, and the way I would answer this backdraw to be very blunt is this is something I think a part of Nagash would know but would never acknowledge. So the answer would be he wouldn't, but you know who would? Archon the Black would know.
Yeah. I think Archon the Black absolutely would, but he's entirely loyal, so he'd never bring it up.
Yeah, he'd never bring it up. If anything, I would see him killing people that try to bring it up.
Yeah, absolutely. That seems like a very Archon thing.
Primogenitor, Nagash was weak with his true power. Good old Manfred. Or literally every necromancer that's ever lived.
And I think it's absolute nonsense. Nagash is not weak. Nagash is extraordinary. And any who attempt to say that completely miss the point of what he managed to do. He did everything that allowed Manfred to even exist.
Yeah. Hey, we all got, it's not genuinely not the worst scene of the end times when everyone that was talking shit about Nagash finally had to deal with when he rolled up and they were like, uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Dr. Awesome, do you think the new Cathay lore will add anything to Nagash's story? I like to believe Yin may have said immortal dragon blood, etc., too much. I would not be shocked if, I don't think they're ever going to do it, but if they ever wanted to revisit the Nagash story, that they would have Cathay's relationship with like the mortuary cult and everything be like it would be mentioned in the story. I don't think it'd be a huge part of the story, but I think it'd be talked about.
If they do Nagash will be tied through to Cathay in the same way that Sigmar and the Empire tied through back to Cathay, because they're attempting to make Cathay a core component of what Warhammer is.
The idea that maybe.
But exactly how they do it is going to be in the hands of whomever it is that writes that section, and it might be handled deftly. It might not. We'll see.
Yeah, I would like, especially with how Cathay is like much more active in like world affairs. Maybe during the War of the Seven Priest Kings, there was a Cathay contingent that fought alongside them. That wouldn't
surprise me. It certainly makes sense.
Yeah.
It also makes sense that they would be, well, they already were supplying them with extras that are somewhat out of time, but let's not worry too much about the
maybe there's a whole plot and part of Nagash's Elixir of Immortality is dragon blood. Or maybe Neferata improved it because she got her hands on dragon blood.
Yeah, there's all sorts of cool stuff that we could weave into the story from there, and I don't think it would necessarily contradict what came before. It would embellish, add, and make the story more complex and deeper.
Yep. Ricky Chapman, we enjoyed the idea that those Dark Elves were the ones who started the War of the Beard, and Marathi sunk their ship, and only for 3 to survive and 1 to be imprisoned because the prison there hides them there as they are loose ends. That's fun.
Yeah, trying to keep away from the rest of Dark Elf society is definitely one way of answering why the fuck they don't just leave.
Yeah, honestly, hiding, and that's fun because then they are coincidentally 2 birds with 1 stone, without realizing that they are being manipulated into being one of those other birds.
Was not necessarily something that some elves didn't want to happen, so I'm not sure that they would necessarily need to hide if that was the core justification.
Yeah. Stephen Lucas, I'm tempted to retcon Nagash actually fused the dead bodies of his elven teachers together and bound them as one of his original Mortarks. That's a fun idea. That's a very cool idea for a Mortark.
And I think also speaks to the outcome of elven arrogance. They believed they were more powerful than him, and this is a perfect manifestation of how they were completely wrong.
Yeah, that would be a very cool, hideous OG Mortark.
Like that. Good one, Stephen. Yeah.
Ricardo, Nahakaran's lifespans looks like Numenorian.
Yeah. Yeah, let's not discuss
In
too
the
much
novels.
about
In the
about
novels.
Captain Americas of the past.
Yeah, God, stupid novels.
Man.
Those novels, like, the whole point of the Nahakarans being that they're trying to escape mortality, and then Mike Lee's like, oh no, they naturally had these crazy long lifespans. Well, then what?
That was
what?
It was
Dumb.
a choice.
Dr. Awesome, what if Nagash learned from a group of Chorfs? I don't think you need to include them. Like it's kind of just like another thing, but like his forge in Nagashazar is not super far from the Darklands.
And I mean, you could, but I don't see any benefit. I think it's far more likely that Nagash and the Chorfs are antithetical to each other, because ultimately they're Chaos Dwarves, and he is not on the side of Chaos. Don't make the easy mistake of making anyone that looks like a bad guy work together. In Warhammer, arguably, Nagash is a good guy.
Yeah, if anything, I think you'd probably have a little story about like how there was a Chaos Dwarf expedition from the Tower of Gorgoth that went to Nagashazar and had a really bad time.
They would have had it rough. And indeed, in many respects, one of the reasons that the Chaos Dwarves have not expanded further could be laid at Nagash's feet.
Yeah. I just want to grab this. I thought elves anything could be undead. Anything. It's not common, but anything could be made undead. Elves cannot be vampires.
Yeah, the vampires is a human condition. Ghouls are a human condition. Undeath is not. There's lots of elves that are almost in a state of undeath anyway. If we take a look at the 8th edition High Elf army list, they've got a lovely little bit where they're discussing elves and death, where they discuss elves that have just sat down, gone to sleep, never woken up, sitting in a state between life and death, feeding on just the winds of magic, like, strangely enough,
a Necrarch.
Yeah, like, in many respects, those who are immortal through the elixir that Nagash made. It's a very elven thing, and the elf then later, because the high elves are not certain if their relative has died or not, so they just leave them. They're not corrupting. They're a little bit like saints that you'll find over in the Empire. They're not corrupting. They're not changing. They just leave them there, and they're like, okay, someone else is going to have to inherit for a while, but Granddad's still alive. And then Granddad, like 100 years later, gets up and goes, okay, good nap. I'm good to go. Elf and undeath is a weird concept because elves in Warhammer are
plus there
weird.
are elven spirits that have lingered in the funniest places.
Yeah, and there's all form of elven wraiths and elven ghosts are all over the place. So yes, elves can be the equivalent of undead, but they're not quite how we view Nagash's undeath.
Yeah, and for the Mortarch type angle, Nagash making, like, especially if he was really putting his personal attention to it, resurrecting or reanimating an elven corpse would be easy for him.
Yeah, it's just flesh in the end.
Yeah.
And it's from the material realm, so material flesh can be fucked about with.
Ricky Chapman, continuing our super chat, the Druki trained Nagash so he could be a useful tool for their revenge on Marathi, only to be undone by their own arrogance.
Yeah, that's a
that
classic.
route too.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, good.
Cole Patterson, Archon is interesting to me because even though his loyalty is being abused, it's so deep it's more like zealotry. I still find it a bit admirable, which is what makes Archon at his best. Like, if he's written at his best, I fully agree. It's almost like seeing someone in an abusive relationship that so deeply admires and loves their abuser that there's an aspect of it that's almost admirable, but it's twisted and it's wrong.
Yeah, totally. It's a classic piece of sunk cost fallacy as well, in that they have done so much to say that this is perfect that they can't very well go back on the last 100 years worth of saying it's perfect. Okay, when something imperfect comes up and they know in their moral code that what's being done is imperfect, they nevertheless go, no, it's perfect.
Archon, literally, and I say this fully knowing what I'm saying, in every way, he is Smithers to Nagash's Mr. Burns. That is so totally accurate.
Archon doesn't learn. Archon does not move on. Archon is very, as you say, zealotry lies to the very core of who he is.
Yeah, one of the things we've actually talked a lot about with Nagash in the past, but it's worth reiterating, is Nagash in most versions of him is very much shown to be a character that's so detached from especially healthy emotions that he's borderline asexual. Like, he has sex for the sake of having children. He does have a lot of kids.
Yeah.
but he doesn't seem to enjoy sex at all. And if anything, is almost repulsed by it. There is definitely a story that is not necessarily told, but could be told. It would not shock me at all if Archon genuinely loved Nagash. And Nagash,
I don't think you necessarily need to go that far.
You don't need to, but for just the
because-
Mr. Smithers, Mr. Burns thing made me think. It wouldn't shock me if that was a story.
If I was using Nagash, I would be much more interested in telling the tale of what power and the corruption that comes along with power can do, and how attractive power is. Not sexually attractive, but the power itself. And the big difference between most real-world figures and Nagash is Nagash and Archon are, as it turns out in the end, correct. Because Nagash, for all of his horror, wins.
Yeah, and there's it's interesting, something that we've discussed as well a little bit, but it's worth reiterating, is that in a lot of ways, the Warhammer world is delightfully complex in that when you're looking at a force like Chaos, Nagash is one of the only genuine threats to it. He is an answer. It's a horrible answer, but it's an answer.
Yeah.
100%.
Dr. Awesome, question for my Wolfrock game. Can Archon be reasoned with? Oh, yeah. Party may encounter him, but it's trying to some sort of reasoning one purpose. Archon needs mortal agents. He uses them a lot.
The quickest way to imagine this, Dr. Awesome, just so that you can at least get into a mindset, is we're dealing with a zealot, someone who absolutely and completely believes in one way of thinking. So think of someone who is politically, ideologically unaligned to you and thinks completely different to you. If you're left-wing, right. If you're right-wing, left. If you are religious, non-religious, whatever particular choice you want. And can those people be reasoned with when they're on the other side? The answer is always yes. And often you'll find on a personal one-to-one basis, they can not only be reasoned with, they're reasonable. The problem is the bigger picture. The bigger picture is unreasonable and cannot be transgressed. But on a one-to-one basis, they can often say, yeah, this is right, this is wrong, this is this is that. So the answer to this is absolutely. He may be a complete convert to the cause, and he is both religious and politically tied to everything that Nagash represents. But that doesn't mean that you can't, and he can't, be reasonable. Absolutely can. But there are certain points where he will never, ever cross. And that is where he suddenly becomes very unreasonable and will sound, to someone who doesn't believe what he believes, utterly crazy, unreasonable, unthinkably stupid, because they are so certain that they are correct on certain points.
Yeah, it's worth keeping in mind, Archon is like a very, very scarily good politician, in that this is a guy that deals with Tomb Kings a lot, and he has to keep them, like,
in line.
He knows how to, like, get Cetra to lay off. Like, Cetra gets mad at him, comes to kill him, and he kind of holds Cetra at bay with endless legions of skeletons until he finally gets Cetra bored enough that Cetra allows him to come and talk to him. And they talk. And Cetra goes, all right, I'm satisfied, and he leaves. Like, Archon is, although he's like a big spooky lich, he's very, very good at manipulating people and talking to people.
And the only way that works is if you have intelligence, you have clarity of thought. And whilst there are certain things that you believe in that others don't, that in no way makes you unreasonable.
Yeah. Sean Schultz, when is the start of Cyborg Andy? Man, that was an unfortunately timed cough there. Which faction are you?
Laughed.
Yeah. Which faction are you the most excited for in the End Times DLC for Total War Warhammer 3?
Fuck me.
Are you more?
I've seen Nagash.
Nagash is gonna be great. Though Thankful should be fun. Thankful is gonna be a good time. Herd Core Revol. Andy being sick is like saying the ocean is blue. Sad but true.
Not wrong. Sad but true.
Listen, his immune system is just it just needs
I have a compromised immune system. It is worth noting. I do.
God sent me to make shiz worse. Very cool. Hey guys, long time no see. Do you predict a Scrag/Butcher stream in celebration of the Ogre refresh? Oh, we'll do something Ogre themed. In fact, actually, since you brought it up, I'm going to be doing a vote for a particular date, which I'll reveal later. And I will promise you right now, all three options will be ogres. It'll be ogre something.
There we go. Ogre something.
Stephen Lucas, wait! Novel necks. had long lifespans. At first, I thought the method mentioned superhumanness was hard work at the cult's blessings, magic elixirs, not natural. Nope. In Mike Lee's novel, it's natural. Nat Karns are literally like golden demigod people.
And the cult stuff is kept by the cult. They don't give it to anyone else. The Nat Karns are just, by that novel, different.
Yeah, they are literal superhumans for reasons.
Wow.
Well, it's explained as like a pact with the gods nonsense, like they're the blessed folk. But then you'd go, wait, then why aren't all the Tomb King skeletons like 8 feet tall superhuman corpses?
Hey,
Shouldn't
I've
they
seen
all
the
be
miniatures. They're actually shorter.
Yeah, shouldn't they be bigger than all of
They
the old
really need new
worlders?
models.
Yes, they do. For me, yeah, Nagash may be a megalomaniac, but he indeed knows the only way to cut the chaos power in this world, turning everybody into an undead.
Yeah, this is, I think, a core of what Nagash represents, because Nagash is correct. If we go with most versions of what the Chaos Gods are, and most versions of how they gain their powers and what would happen to the Warhammer world, if Nagash turned the entire world undead and there was absolutely zero motion, everything was controlled by him, then the answer would be Chaos do be fucked. And they're not going to take over the Warhammer world. Corruption is not going to work. There is no corrupting people who are controlled in such a fashion. The only one to potentially corrupt would be Nagash, and he's too clever for that because he rocks. Just listen to Arkan. He'll tell you how clever he is. So he's not wrong, which is what makes him such a persuasive leader. For all he is the freaking worst.
Yeah, he is a different devil, which makes the world exciting.
Yeah. It's good to have complicated and well-reasoned bad guys. And in this case, we have one. Nagash is a pretty damn good bad guy.
When he's written well, which he should be a lot of the time, Nagash should be the kind of figure that if someone from the Warhammer world walked into Nagash's R, he would have a unless they were like a very willful person, he could probably convince them over to his side over the course of a conversation.
I think so. Because the message
which is basically what Dieter Hellschnitt is.
I'll change that. I wouldn't say necessarily convince him to his side, but convince him that he's not wrong. It's not necessarily the same. That allows people who, for example, have alternate theories and different ways of doing it to say, look, I think this is better than your crazy fucking plan, which involves everybody dying, even though your plan would probably work. My plan is just to, kick ass, chew gum. I'll be fine because I'm playing Warhammer. Chop, chop, chop.
Yeah, there would be a beautiful short story that no one's written, but that would be super cool. Of like at some point, especially like long time pre-end times, there's a cool story that can be written out there of like Marathi for whatever reason, either making the trip to Nagashazar or like through her seer powers, like having a conversation with the spirit of Nagash, and that being a genuinely fascinating discussion amidst like maybe an earlier Everchosen. That like Nagash, it should have faced one of the earlier Everchosens, like an Everchosen going to Nagashazar to destroy him, and that being like a whole cool storyline. But essentially, yes.
Yeah, totally. And Nagash is a fine example of what it takes to think that sort of outcome is acceptable. He's a fucking lunatic.
Oh yeah,
and he's psychopath.
He's horrible, and just because he's right about
the worst.
Yeah,
and just because what he's doing could come up with an answer that is correct, doesn't mean that literally what he's doing is the absolute annihilation of everything in front of his path. He's a true monster, and that's quite fun.
Yeah, it's the whole. There's once again, the end time's terrible, but there are moments where I'm like, oh, that's kind of fun. Of like, there's a discussion that unfortunately doesn't last nearly as long as I would have liked, and it should have probably happened between two different characters, where Nagash essentially talks to Throg, of all people, Throg the Troll King, and they have a genuinely kind of interesting snippet of a discussion in an otherwise terrible book, where Nagash tries to lure Throg over to his side of basically saying, I am right, and death is inevitable, and and all this stuff. And the Throg,
he's right in some ways.
Yeah, but
hold on,
let me finish.
For example, the Chaos Gods could be held off by what he's doing, but he's ultimately completely wrong about his assessment of the gods as a whole. His assessment of the gods as a whole is utterly arrogant and misplaced. He's completely wrong, but his arguments against them are entirely compelling. So, as one comment,
yeah, because he's a solution, but it's a horrible solution.
Yeah, and this one here, the Sigmarite slowly losing his say, simply talking philosophy with Nagash, is, I think, a great potential outcome. And it would be a corruption because ultimately the Sigmarite is, in many respects, correct about the cores of his beliefs. And Nagash, in many respects, concerning the gods, is utterly wrong. And that is also good. Just because some of your message is correct doesn't mean that your entire message is correct. And that's super fun.
Yeah, there's definitely aspects of like Nagash, once again, for a villain, is the good kind of right because he's so deeply. There are things that he is technically right about, which is what reinforces his conviction and makes him utterly blind to the things he is not right about.
Yeah, I mean, again, we can look across the world. Take any political leader that you know across the world and take a look at all the things that they espouse. I'm sure there's several parts of it that no matter where you sit politically, you go, yeah, that's right, and that's right. And it's often those core rights that make them believe all the things that you think are wrong are also correct, because if they're right about this, they're also right about all these things, and then there we get disagreements. And that's great. No side is completely right. Nagash is completely correct about his ultimate outcome, but it's horrific. It's horrendous and morally completely wrong, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, to finish my little statement of the whole thing with Throg, of that Nagash basically offers Throg to join his side with the explanation that like chaos is the worst thing imaginable. Granted, he does the whole thing of like, I'm gonna win and I will make like a perfect utopia, and Throg's response is that it is essentially Throg saying that Throg loves life and is willing to put up with chaos because at least there's a chance for change. Even if Nagash did win, what Nagash offers is, from Throg's perspective, worse than what chaos offers because there is no change. And without change, like there's nothing. As far as Throg is concerned.
I just want to bring up that comment because broadly, yes, absolutely. It's deeper than that in real life. It's deeper than that here as well. We can all be right in different ways. Just because Nagash is right about his particular end goal doesn't mean that Marathi isn't also right about her end goal. Different routes towards the same outcome, or Sigmar as God and his particular outcome. But they're all completely different. They all have different views for how the end goal against chaos should be fought. And that indeed leads to many of the conflicts that lie behind it all.
Contrary to how it may sound in this particular stream, there are non-villainous characters that also have their own answers to chaos that could theoretically work. But if you're not a ends justify the means strategist, it becomes much harder.
Like Dark Elves and Nagash.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Permission and greetings, Sotek, Mr. Law. Both of you were absent for many days. I could not believe at first you were streaming. Yeah, we're back.
I'm sort of back.
Sort of back.
Yeah. Back. I mean, I'm here.
Stephen Luke is shorter. Pygmies confirmed. We'll see myself out. Don't let the door hit you on the way out from bringing up Pygmies.
Just as a small aside on that one, just because it is a terribly small one, I saw the original version of the Oompa Loompas today. So the Oompa Loompas, guess what? They were Games Workshop's old Pygmies. They were tiny little black people. Yeah. And I was like, holy crap, that got changed 10 years after the first publication because he was called out correctly, Rodal, for being utterly racist with the servitor species that he created. And he went, oops, yeah, you're right, that didn't come out very well. So he made them all fair-haired and white instead, which is not necessarily the best fix either. In the movie, they obviously went with orange. That's the choice.
The joys. Yeah, just paint your pygmies orange with green hair and they're fine now.
They're fine now. Yeah, totally. So maybe that's what Games Workshop will do to fix their version.
Aragas the Pillager thought about Neferata improving the elixir with dragon blood. What was it that Aberach drank to overcome his thirst? Dragon blood. Yeah, so the thing, actually, if anything, this could be the argument for that maybe Nagash's version had dragon blood, but Neferata couldn't acquire it because Cathay had basically abandoned them after the whole Nagash thing.
I think there is something in that.
Yeah. Because once a vampire gets the dragon blood, it cures the curses of Nagash functionally. Which actually, I guess that
By
would be
myth.
by myth, according to myth.
Because we only really have one that's definitely done it.
Yeah, because Zacharias is really funny because Zacharias is a character that should tell us that, he's cured from drinking blood, but Zacharias doesn't drink blood anyway. He's a necrarch. He just feeds on the winds of magic. So we don't actually know if that's true.
Yeah, it's like bullshit. It's another one that's somewhat mythical, and it makes for a great myth for the entire line to hunt down dragons for potentially a completely different reason. I think that's a classic example of you spin a myth in game, and then that myth through a roleplay scenario, for example, is turned out to be entirely false and is doing something else, and then you build a really cool story for why that's the case. Make for a good novel too.
Yeah, but that pretty much takes us to the end of our time today. And you'll note that, did we get through the full story of Nagash? No, but we covered a lot of the missing things that the original stream didn't cover, where we focused a lot more on his overall saga. Now, at this point, I do want to reveal that the plan for season 6 is that we're going to treat Nagash with the proper respect that he should be treated with, and there's going to be a number of follow-up streams. So the schedule for Fantasy Lorebeards is that this upcoming Tuesday, we're going to finish season 5 with what if some other gods came to the Warhammer Fantasy world and what could be the result of their entering. And there's a list. I think it's Tiamat from D&D. I think the Doomslayer and a couple of other characters. It'll be fun. Hopefully it'll be me and Andy, but it'll be happening no matter what. We might even have on some of the other Lorebeards just for funsies. We'll just see how Andy's feeling, but that should be just a fun way to end off the season. Just have a good chat. But next Sunday, we are going to be doing essentially the part 3 to Nagash, which is we're going to be doing a full stream on the Crown of Sorcery.
Crown of Sorcery. So we originally said we'd do this almost 3 years ago in the last version of the Nagash stream. Go watch the last Nagash stream and you'll hear me saying, probably with a much more ginger beard, we should probably do a whole stream on the Crown of Sorcery. We never have. So this should be a super fun one.
Yep, so we'll be talking about the founding of Morkane. We'll be talking about Morath the Necromancer. We'll be talking about Azhag the Slaughterer. Sigmar Helmhammer. Yeah, and there's some really thought-provoking conspiracies that revolve around the crown. It is actually one of the most important artifacts in the old world.
It really is. It's an important one. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that one a lot. I love the Crown of Sorcery, not only because I used to use it a hell of a lot when I played Warhammer back in the 4th and 5th edition, where it was a core magic item.
Yeah, so we do hope that y'all will join us for that. It should be super duper fun. And then the Sunday after that, I don't know exactly what we'll be doing that. Oh, no, I do know what we'll be doing that Tuesday, so I'll go ahead and say it now. So not this Tuesday, which is the other gods coming to Warhammer, but the first bonus stream. So the following Tuesday on the 18th, we're going to be getting caught up with the old world, where me and Andy will be going over the new Battle March lore book, and then the totally not confusingly similar named The March of Chaos, which is a completely different battle tome.
God damn it.
Which is going to be more lore that follows what Chaos is up to.
Lore about more?
Yeah, where I believe we're actually going to get the ending of Friedel the Chainmaker's invasion storyline, according to some of the little snippets. We'll see what that's about. And then the Sunday, the 23rd, we will be finishing the Nagash story, where we will be doing Nagash and AOS, just like we did with Marathi. So that'll be a big Sunday stream. I don't know where we're going to do that Tuesday. We'll probably
find out after that.
And then the 30th, so the 30th of August is what the poll that I'm going to be putting up in a little bit will be about, where all 3 options will be ogre related.
Damn straight. Ogres.
But if Andy's got any little outro stuff he wants to do, after that we'll get caught up on Super Chat stuff.
Yeah, no, all I'm going to say for the end of this particular stream is that Nagash has, within the lore that we have, a lot of fascinating detail in his early years that have to be the case for him to exist as the character that he is. unfortunately, most of the writing around it doesn't quite match the complexity of the character that we have. And I'm not calling out any individual writer for this. It's almost a universal issue.
Yeah, I will also say, if you want it, guys, let us know. Like, leave comments and stuff. If on the 25th you want that bonus stream to be the Nagash trilogy, let us know. We'll do it.
God,
we'll do it.
Don't corner me into that. But yeah, sure, we'll do it. A lot of the writing around Nagash misses a lot of the core components of what makes Nagash, and in particular the mortuary cult and what we know it is, because individual writers have come along and they've only used a snapshot of the greater lore each time. If we take all of the lore that has been written about Nagash, though, we have ourselves a deep, complex, and morally interesting story about an individual, a mortal man, and his absolute craving for power, and what ultimately becomes his reason for claiming that power. It's fascinating. And whether you prefer your Numenorian style Nehekarans, where they're all Captain Americas and have long lifespans, or you prefer the original version of the Nehekarans where they were just normal humans living down there, and whether you prefer Nagash who died in the deserts or didn't die in the deserts, all of those things wrap up to say that he is a mythical entity. An entity with conflicting and different stories, and this is to, I think, his benefit, because we can then discuss out different things that could and couldn't have happened, and what those myths then do to later versions of the lore, and the fact that Nagash is still alive, and promoting those myths. Because as we speak to the Nagash character that we have in later Warhammer, he is an individual, an entity that seeks to bring down the gods themselves, and he needs support to do this. And he gathers it around him, not just with his not just with his Mortarchs et al., but with other allies too. He needs to work with others, and part of doing that is the myths that have been built around this immortal entity. What we can say for certain is that he is immortal, and he becomes later a god. And he absorbs, if we go to the end times, the powers of gods. And that in and of itself speaks to a very interesting and fascinating individual. And I'm quite looking forward to talking a little bit more about all of this lore surrounding him, including the good old Crown of Sorcery itself.
Yeah, which, man, y'all are, if you've never actually been aware of how important that thing is to, like, everything that happens in the old world, oh boy, you're in for a ride.
Oh, yeah.
For me, yeah, conspiracy theories of Warhammer World stream. Dear people, we demand, please. I don't even know how we would do that.
There are so many we could discuss. I mean, most of our streams involve at least one conspiracy theory. Like, for example, this one, Nagash never died when he was in the deserts. He just didn't. And it's, as conspiracy theories go, pretty well founded in the lore, but it's still a conspiracy theory because the black and white text says he did.
Yeah, because I don't, oh man, that would be such a, like, technically the Skaven are considered a conspiracy theory in, like, the Empire. Like, that would get so messy. Oh my, listen, I would be potentially open to doing it, but, like, you'd have to pitch formatting, because I have no idea how we would format that. Grim Isaac, so the plan is doing Tiamat, Morgoth, Doomslayer, and Rykard all in one stream. Yes. That is the list. And it's a good list, because I know all four of those fairly well. But anyway, I'm
just gonna bring that one up just because I think it's nice.
Yeah, Darshall, that's you'll see this can't super chat. I just want to say thank you too for making not only best lore videos around, but such a safe and open community for Warhammer fans. Thank you, we appreciate that.
Thank you very much, massively appreciated. Everybody is welcome here.
Yep, as long as you're not a dick and you behave yourself.
And his world, where many folk are not welcome at all, including Chaos.
Yeah, and do think about joining the. We'll have a forum thread, up over on our Discord for people to discuss this episode and everything we talked about it. If you're interested in joining that, please do consider jumping into that. And yes, we'll be discussing the down and dirty D&D Tiamat, the Dragon God Tiamat, not the actual original one that everyone bastardized.
Thanks.
Hey Walker, thank you so much. All right.
Massively
and
appreciated.
with that, we're done for today. So thank you all so much for joining, and we will see y'all on Tuesday. Bye-bye.